Chapter 888. Are you the tiny beasts? Chapter 888. Are you the tiny beasts? He was just a teenager, but he was 10 meters tall. Gold light radiated all over his body like a golden, angelic armor. Fei Lan, Leona, Zi Yarrow, Carthew, and the warriors from the raging Flamestar area had never seen this race before. Seeing the giant teenager, they were so scared that they instinctively wanted to attack him. Don't do anything. Shi Yang gave a low shout, preventing everyone from acting blindly. He spoke with a heavy countenance. Don't be wanton. He hasn't shown any bad intentions. Don't provoke him first. Shi Yang could see that this big boy of the giant clan wasn't at a high realm. This gold giant had only the King God realm. At most, this teenager was at the third sky of King God realm. If they had to fight him, he wouldn't be able to beat Fei Lan and Leona. The giant teenager looked naive. His black eyes were filled with curiosity. He stooped to look at them as if he was watching some peculiar creatures. Slowly, he crouched, craning his round head. His voice was like the noisy sounds from a giant bell. Are you also beasts? I have never seen such tiny beasts. You look so cute. Since he was 10 meters tall, even when he was crouching, he looked like a dazzling gold cloud, which pressured everyone. He studied Shi Yang's group like how people observed mice on the ground. Compared to the giant boy's physique, Shi Yang's group looked really tiny. So cute. All of the warriors gawked. No matter how hard they tried to imagine, they would have never imagined that the first creature they had ever met in this area would tell them that they looked cute. Are you the tiny beasts? The giant teenager asked curiously. Will you be my pets? I will find you good food. All the warriors felt very awkward. This giant teenager seemed to have never met any small creatures. Perhaps he was living in a closed area where he only saw the massive beasts. All of a sudden, meeting a much smaller race must have felt exciting and adventurous. We aren't beasts, Shi Yang smiled forcefully. He lifted his head, feeling very pressured. We are like you. We have blood and flesh. We're also humanoid creatures. However, we're smaller than you. Hey, why are you here? Jia. The teenager's stomach made a funny sound, but it was as loud as a thunderclap. He didn't feel embarrassed. He just rubbed his tummy and ruffled his hair. I'm hungry. I'm going to get some food. Do you want to come with me? Shi Yang was astounded. Fei Lan and Leona exchanged looks. They didn't know what to do since they couldn't access the situation very well. They had never heard about the giant clan before, let alone met with one of its kind. They were frightened to see the giant abruptly. And Shi Yang was trying to be close, forming a relationship with him. People couldn't make head or tail out of it. They didn't know what he really wanted to do. Sure, Shi Yang agreed frankly. Follow me. I'm going to find you food. The teenager was so excited, clapping his hands. You guys are so tiny. I guess you don't eat much. The beast I hunted down is massive. I think it'll be enough for you to eat for a long time. Then, he walked happily towards the fire sea. While he was sauntering, the earth-shaking noises arose for the second time. Shi Yang, what is that? Fei Lan frowned. Do you know what clan he belongs to? He's from the giant clan. You have never seen this clan before? Shi Yang asked skeptically. Never heard of it before. Ka Tuor's face looked odd. Really? Shi Yang was surprised, smiling. There's a rumor about this clan in my homeland. This clan is a friendly and hospitable clan. Although they are intimidating, they don't have bad intentions. I think our fortune isn't bad since the first creature we've met here is a giant. So, your homeland has the giant clan? Is this place your homeland? Fei Lan's eyes brightened. Shaking his head, Shi Yang wore a sad countenance. If it were my homeland, I wouldn't have to go to the raging Flamestar area. I told you before. The energy in my homeland is exhausted. It won't be a suitable place for warriors soon. So why is the giant clan staying here? Feng Rao was curious. God knows, Shi Yang smiled miserably. Let's go. We should talk to our little buddy. Folks, please remember this. We shouldn't provoke him at any cost. Although the giants are nice, they aren't afraid of fighting. And when they define you as their enemies, they won't let you live any longer. People discolored. Fei Lan hesitated for a while then nodded. Listen to him. If someone dares to antagonize them, don't blame me for being heartless. Shi Yang took the lead, walking in the direction the teenager had gone. Everybody was baffled. They put aside the thought of attacking the giant and followed him silently. They wanted to see how Shi Yang would deal with that big boy. Shortly after, they arrived in a place shrouded by fire. It was a massive fire that used around 10 logs that were the size of humans. A 10-meter beast was being roasted on this fire. The delicious fragrance filled their nostrils. The giant teenager sat by the giant fire. He was using another spear made of white bone to rotate the beast on the fire. The roasted beast cooked into a delicious yellow-red color. Oil and fat oozed out with a great aroma. The teenager didn't care about how hot the roasted meat was as he tore a big chunk of meat. He then chewed it happily. Seeing Shi Yang and his team arrive, he smiled kindly. Here. It's for you guys. He tore another massive block of roasted meat, which was around several hundred kilograms. It was the best fresh and soft sirloin of this beast. The attractive aroma of the roasted meat invaded their nostrils when the meat fell on a rock by them. Thud. The roasted meat fell, sending oil around. A fragrance that intrigued everyone's appetite permeated the place. It was not true that the warriors didn't need to eat. Their appetite was quite sated. Since they had the fantasy sky ring and were out for an operation, they could use some dry provisions to fill their stomachs. All the warriors had been hungry for a long time. Since the day they left the Heaven Punishment City, they hadn't had cooked meat. When that giant block of meat fell on the ground in front of them, everybody felt a great urge to eat. Some even drooled. It will be, all right? Alchemist Jester licked his lips worriedly. Shi Yang snorted, his face cold. He was the first one to tear a large piece of meat, gnawing immediately. With oil and fat all over his mouth, he couldn't help but shout. Awesome. Hey, drink something. Carthew's eyes brightened up, laughing. The fantasy sky ring on his finger flashed and jugs of quality wine lined up in front of him. People could take as many as they pleased. Carthew was famous in the Raging Flamestar area for his sophisticated taste in wine and liquor. His fantasy sky ring never lacked good liquors. When he lifted the seal on the bottle, the sweet aroma of his wine diffused and flooded the area immediately. Shi Yang casually reached his hands out and a bottle fell into his palm. He lifted his head and drank. Jester and Ka Tuor hesitated for a while before they extended hands toward the bottles. Right at this moment, a giant gold hand landed from the sky. Jester and Ka Tuor discolored in fright. Their energies immediately twirled around their bodies. Brutal light sparkled in their eyes. Don't move. Shi Yang gave a low shout. Ka Tuor lowered his guard, frowning and saying nothing. Jester hesitated for a while before he could stand still. The gold hand slowly lowered down from the sky like a massive cluster of a gold cloud. It avoided Jester and Ka Tuor, pinching a jug of wine. He just wanted to grab a drink. The wine bottle was as large as a giant watermelon, but it looked like a pocket cup in his hand. The teenage giant finished it in one gulp. He said unsatisfyingly, so good, but too little. Then, he reached out to grab the bottles in front of Carthew. At this moment, the warriors knew that he didn't mean harm. He was just a kid trying liquor. They smiled oddly, looking at him pick up the jug, finish it in only one sip, and then reach for another one. Within 30 seconds, he had finished around 10 jugs of wine. He seemed to still not be satisfied yet. His longing eyes gazed at Carthew. Do you have more? Sure, Carthew smiled, stroking his fantasy sky ring. More big bottles appeared, lining neatly in front of him. The teenager's eyes brightened. He laughed cheerily. You guys are so nice. I'm Xiao Man. Pleased to meet you. Your juice is really mellow. Much better than what my uncle makes. But it's too little. Not enough for me. While talking, he reached out for more bottles, finished them and continued drinking more. Shortly after, there lay almost 100 empty wine bottles in front of Carthew. Burp. The teenager nodded, burped satisfyingly. He rubbed his tummy then sat down. His gold face was red. Tiny beasts, go home with me. I'll ask Uncle to build you the best cage. Carthew, Ka Tuor, Jester, and the other were embarrassed, giving forced smiles. We're not tiny beasts. Just like you, we are living beings, explained Carthew. The giant teenager sat on the ground. He looked so drunk, speaking with a red face. Ah, right, I got it. You're smart tiny beasts. You can talk. After pausing for a while, he continued, tiny beasts, come home with me. Everyone felt very awkward. Drunk, right? Carthew asked Shiyang with astonishment. Shouldn't you say something polite to him? I think you can start now, right? Polite words. Shiyang was surprised, talking angrily. Do I have such bad thoughts? To friendly and nice people like him, why do we need to say something cliché? We just need to ask him directly. Whether he is drunk or not, he will answer us honestly. He's just a kid. He won't act as complicated as you think. Don't think that all people have bad thoughts like you, Leona scolded him coldly. Carthew was embarrassed, speaking shyly. Haha, I just said that without thinking. I meant no harm. You guys think too much. People could see he was afraid of Leona for some unknown reason. Tiny beasts, I'm about to become an adult soon. When I collect enough skulls for my necklace, I will return to the mountain. Yeah, I just need 30 more to complete my harvest for the ceremony. The giant teenager named Xiao Man was too drunk. He looked at a place far away, speaking as if he was dreaming. It has been a long time since I saw my dad. If he knew that I would finish the coming-of-age ritual this quickly, he would be so excited. Bad guys. After my ritual, I will be able to kill the bad guys. Kill the bad guys. The boy mumbled. His eyelids twitched as he fell by the fire. Then, his earth-shaking snoring resounded like thunderclaps. Everybody was perplexed. Chapter 889, The 8 Great Inheritances. Chapter 889, The 8 Great Inheritances. The teenage giant named Xiao Man wasn't vigilant. He seemed to be so naive that he didn't know how cruel people could be. After drinking almost 100 bottles of strong liquor, he fell and slept on the ground. Jester and Carthew had put up guard, thinking that this giant would have the same mindset as them. They got embarrassed seeing that he was innocent and nice. He wasn't afraid of the others since he just blacked out like that. All the warriors were surprised by his innocence. The warriors of the Raging Flamestar area had been hungry for a long time. Seeing the giant sleeping, they didn't think much. They started to dig in the roasted beast. They quickly finished several 100 kilograms of roasted meat. Rubbing their tummies, everybody felt so good. They scattered leisurely, temporarily forgetting the possible dangers in this area. Looking at the starry sky with the moon and sun absent, they felt cozy and relaxed. At this moment, Fei Lan suddenly got up, throwing a glance at Shiyang and Ka Tuor. You two, follow me. I have something to tell you. Shiyang and Ka Tuor stood up silently, walking together with Leona and following Fei Lan. Carthew, Jester, Zi Yarrow, Feng Rao contemplated following them and decided not to eavesdrop. They remained where they were. They understood that these 4 people had some secret. Otherwise, how could Shiyang, a man of unknown origin, and the pirate Ka Tuor be related to high-level experts like Fei Lan and Leona? Fei Lan and Leona, one was the protector of Heaven Punishment City and the other was the leader of the 5 feudal vassals of Dark Firmament Divine Nation. Why did they act as if they've known each other for quite a long time? In the thick forest, everywhere was under the shade of big, ancient trees. Shiyang and the other 3 stopped by a tree. An unknown barrier covered them, preventing people from eavesdropping. You tell them, Fei Lan mused for a while then looked at Leona. Leona nodded, turning to Shiyang and Ka Tuor. I'm sure you guys are full of doubts. Shiyang and Ka Tuor nodded. They were very curious, indeed. In fact, we haven't figured out everything yet. I'll only tell you the things that I think you should know as of now. Leona contemplated for a while then continued, a long, long time ago, we were just common people living in a small life-star of Dark Firmament Divine Nation. Common people? Shiyang was surprised. Right, common people, Leona nodded, Our ancestors lived by the shore of that life star. They were fishermen. They didn't know power Upanishad. We didn't have any warriors at that time. Until one day, my ancestors found a floating man on the sea. He was wounded and in a fatal condition. He was going to die at any moment. My ancestor brought him home, trying his best to take care of him. Gradually, he restored his consciousness. When he woke up, he hastened to leave. However, he was grateful to my ancestor. For the assistance, he left his inheritance to us. It was the Dark Power Upanishad inheritance. Before he left, he told my ancestor that he would go to an ancient continent, his homeland, to impart the inheritance of his master. He said that he couldn't live any longer and that he would possibly die soon. He asked us to cultivate the Dark Power Upanishad and maintain his inheritance. He didn't tell us his name, but he bestowed a name to our family. We are a line of the dark sky. He worried that the chasers would find him here. Not long after he had woken up, he tore the sky and left. At that moment, my ancestor was frightened. He found that he was the most intimidating warrior in the world. Since he'd seen his powers, they had an admiration and desire for powers. My ancestor memorized his advice and lived it through. We've considered the Dark Power Upanishad our foundation. We have always consistently cultivated it intensely. The Dark Power Upanishad is strong and subtle. With this power, my ancestor had become the overlord of that life star. With another lucky encounter, my ancestor became the first imperial master of the divine nation. He gained fame and high ranks. The power of the Dark Upanishad threatened the entire star area. However, due to his innate endowment, my ancestor couldn't reach the peak. He passed away. However, he still memorized the advice from that person. The Dark Power Upanishad is our family's foundation. He knew that this Upanishad was the core for our family to strive. Every generation received and will continue to receive this inheritance. Then, Leona paused, looking at Shiyang. I can confirm that the expert who had taught us the Dark Power Upanishad was the man you've mentioned, Laro Luo. Shiyang knitted his brows and nodded. It could be true. Before the energy in my homeland was exhausted, it was an ancient continent, a life star with essence. My inheritance also came from that. Anything related to him, we hadn't shared with anyone. Never. Because we knew one day, someone would ask us about it. Leona hesitated. Who? Shiyang's eyes brightened. Many years later, a mysterious expert appeared in the raging flame star area. He cultivated Dead Power Upanishad. He had cleaned up many life stars, turning them into barren and desolate areas. Leona took a deep breath, looking at Shiyang. You've heard about the legend of that man from Yarrow, I suppose? Shiyang was shocked. He nodded a second time. After he had appeared in the raging flame star area, he was wanton, not afraid of anything. He destroyed dozens of life stars just to recover from his wounds. Forces from everywhere gathered experts to kill him. Another ancestor of mine, also an imperial master of the Dark Firmament Divine Nation, had joined this operation. You all know the results. After the hotshots of the entire raging flame star area saw that man, they immediately knew the difference between their realms. They weren't strong enough to even have a chance to defeat them. They thought they were going to die immediately. Why didn't they die? Ka Tuor intervened. Because my ancestor had used his Dark Power Upanishad, Leona looked at Shiyang. Since it was from the same line, he recognized it, right? Shiyang understood immediately. Yes, that is correct. The invader recognized it and stopped attacking. That is why the warriors of the other forces were saved. And then, he talked to my ancestor, the imperial master of the Dark Firmament Divine Nation. What did they talk about? He asked how my ancestor got the inheritance. And then, he told my ancestor that the man who had imparted our family the Dark Power Upanishad was like him. He was one of the 8 great inheritances. And that man was going to give the Dead Power Upanishad inheritance. He came to the raging flame star area to rescue his brother who was another inheritance. His brother cultivated Chaotic Power Upanishad. He was imprisoned in the God-perishing land inside the land of God punishment. Ka Tuor's eyes brightened, looking at her without blinking. Leona nodded, continuing, he also said that he had a brother who cultivated corrosive power Upanishad. But that man was dead. He said that he wasn't sure that he could survive after this rescue mission. He wanted to impart his brother's inheritance. So, he gave another inheritance, the corrosive power Upanishad, which is what my big aunt is cultivating. He wanted my ancestor to impart and maintain this power Upanishad in our family, and keep it from extinguishing. He gave him a blood shield and said that it was one of the master's precious objects. He advised that if my ancestor's grandchildren had a chance to meet his master's heir, they should give him that blood shield. From that man, my ancestor knew that people from the 8 great inheritances had a blood mark and the master that the 8 great inheritances serve possessed a ring. His heir would also have that ring. It's a sign. Upon her words, Leona looked at Shi Yang and the blood vein ring on his fingers. Shi Yang was shaken. His eyes brightened up. He left to save his brother in the god-perishing land. My ancestor stayed in the raging flame star area to impart the corrosive power Upanishad that he'd just received. We are eternally grateful for what he did. We always wanted to go to the god-perishing land to solve the riddle of the 8 great inheritances. My ancestors held the title of Imperial Master of the Dark Firmament Divine Nation for several generations. Because of the intimidating Dark Upanishad and Corrosive Upanishad, we had thriven. And then, my ancestors had been able to manipulate the king of the divine nation. We were the real owners of the divine nation. My family had become stronger and stronger. We controlled endless sources. Our wild schemes had increased accordingly. Until one day, when the seniors of the family felt that they were equipped enough to explore the god-perishing land, they went there to reveal the secret of the 8 great inheritances. That was why we got the star map after years of exploring that area. Until the last generation of the family, my father cultivated the dark power Upanishad, and my big uncle cultivated the corrosive power Upanishad. They were really powerful. At that time, no one in the raging flame star area could resist them. My father was the hidden hand that manipulated the divine nation. He held the true power of the divine nation. My big uncle stayed in the land of God punishment to conquer all the pirates. The powers and forces they had controlled were enough to defeat the entire raging flame star area. One day, when my father and my big uncle had broken through to the ethereal god realm, they couldn't hold it anymore. They used the star map made by my ancestors to explore the god-perishing land. At that moment, I was just a little girl. But I had mastered the true meaning of the dark power. My big aunt had inherited the corrosive power Upanishad from my big uncle. My father and my big uncle knew that they could encounter fatal dangers. Thus, my aunt and I didn't join their expedition. We stay to maintain the inheritance of the dark power and the corrosive power. They haven't returned yet. When my father and uncle left, they brought many hotshots of the family. They all disappeared. My family then declined. Since our power had decreased tremendously, the dark sky couldn't control the divine nation anymore. Then, the hotshots of the raging flame star area joined hands to destroy the remaining warriors of our dark sky family. Finally, we were uprooted. Big Aunt had taken me, a little girl at that time, to the land of God punishment to avoid this coup. The large dark sky family, which used to be the real overlords of the raging flame star area, was reduced to only me and my aunt. The only thing here to celebrate is that my aunt and I have survived. The inheritances of dark power and corrosive power haven't been extinguished yet. At this part, Leona became sorrowful. Her voice lowered. When I saw you that day, I knew that the man who imparted the dead Upanishad failed. The experts who cultivated chaotic power Upanishad had also passed away. That was why you have the luck to inherit his chaotic power Upanishad. That was why I've been protecting you for years, said Fei Lan to Ka Tuor with an indifferent visage. I will memorize it in my heart. Ka Tuor was so grateful. Yeah, so that's how it has happened, Leona simply briefed. Precursor Laro Luo and the one who cultivated dead power Upanishad met my ancestors and left the dark and corrosive power Upanishad inheritances. My family had used those powers to rule the raging flame star area. Since my father and my big uncle wanted to reveal the riddle of the 8 great inheritances, They had entered the God-perishing land. We don't know whether they are still alive or not. But my family has declined ever since. Now, there are only my big aunt and me. Why didn't they bring the star map with them? Shi Yang was surprised. My father knew where the star map leads to, so he didn't need it. He left the star map so future generations could continue his expedition. The star map was always in the extreme purgatory field in the purgatory star. My ancestors had built that place. However, I didn't expect that you could take it. Seems like God's will is somewhere in the dark. Leona was a little bit touched. You've cultivated the dark power Upanishad, and Du Tianji still wants to employ you to work for the dark firmament divine nation? Shi Yang asked suspiciously. I can't deny that Du Tianji does have the mindset of an overlord. He knows my background and origin pretty well. He has given me important roles. He cleaned up critics' opinions of me and made me his feudal vassal. Compared to his precursors, he's more valiant and cunning. He has the characteristics of a hero. He does this because he thinks that he can always subdue me. Leona appraised the man honestly. Chapter 890, Living in Harmony. Chapter 890, Living in Harmony. Shi Yang's group of 4 discussed the 8 great inheritance and matters related to the blood mark. Leona explained everything she knew. She didn't conceal anything. Then, she turned to Shi Yang. How about you? What did you encounter? Fei Lan and Ka Tuor also looked at him. This was the topic that all of them wanted to know about. From what Leona had guessed, after Laro Luo left the raging flamestar area, he must have gone to Shi Yang's ancient continent to leave his master's inheritance. Apparently, Shi Yang with the blood vein ring had received the inheritance of the master of the bloodthirstis cortege of 8. He was now also the master. They really wanted to know why this young man received the most mysterious inheritance and how he got to the raging flamestar area. Me. Shi Yang was reluctant. It isn't too complicated. I was lucky that I got this ring. I'm still baffled to this day as to why I received this. Compared to you, I don't even know the bloodthirstis 8 great inheritances. At this moment, I can't discover the mysteries of this ring. Fei Lan, Leona, and Ka Tuor were astonished. When that precursor left, he told us that he wanted to go to an ancient continent, which should have an essence. I think he must be implying something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to make it so complicated. I think there is something hidden. Leona looked at him, hesitating for a while before she continued. You must have something strange on your body. Otherwise, you couldn't have received the inheritance. It's the most important inheritance after all. Something strange, Shi Yang frowned, musing on that idea. Talking about strange things, he did have one. He wasn't from this world. Perhaps, he could be from another universe. Concealing light sparkled in his eyes. He changed his face slightly as he thought of a possibility. Perhaps, the inheritance of the bloodthirstis cortege of 8 could summon souls from another universe through that blood pond. Science and technology in his previous world had developed to the peak. Their trends weren't similar to this place, where warriors ruled all. His previous world didn't have any life star that still contained earth and heaven energy. They didn't have power Upanishad cultivation techniques either. People there just depended on machinery. If that blood pond had the power to attract and guide souls from another universe, did that carry any deep meaning? Was it true that only a soul that didn't belong in this universe could inherit the blood vein ring's master's legacy? Does he now have the choice to lead the bloodthirstis cortege of 8 to a hopeful and glorious future? Shi Yang furrowed his brows. The more he thought about it, the more possible it seemed. Perhaps, only the ancient continent on a life star with an essence could do that. Was this why Laro Luo didn't mind traveling countless miles across the universe with his wounded body to leave the inheritance, guiding the soul from another universe to receive his master's inheritance? This was the ultimate secret that he would never share with anyone. Thus, he pondered for a while, shaking his head with forced smiles. I'm just simply a foolish boy who had the best fortune. It's not as complicated as you think. Fei Lan and Leona were the characters who had almost become legends. How could they not notice his lie? However, they knew how to behave in such a situation. They didn't pry him for more information. I've kept this blood shield. Now, I'm going to hand it to you as our ancestors had asked us to do. Fei Lan pondered for a while before begrudgingly taking out the small shield. She handed it to Shi Yang. I suggest you not to use this shield before you reached the original God realm. This shield is really bizarre. Before you get its approval, you should treat it well. The simple shield flew to Shi Yang's palm. It had a heavy cold yin qi, but Shi Yang couldn't see anything strange on both sides of the small shield. Holding the shield, Shi Yang triggered his mind. The blood mark in the glabella of his god soul emerged clearly. A strange seal energy seeped to the shield. Instantaneously, the shield emitted thick blood light. A mark of blood clouds appeared on one side of the shield. Shortly after, it turned into a bunch of blood light, disappearing into the blood vein ring. The shield now stayed in a large space together with the Sky Destroyer divine sword inside the blood vein ring. Leona and Fei Lan's eyes brightened as they nodded. Shi Yang also smiled, caressing the blood vein ring. Seems like I can control it. The blood vein ring on his finger wasn't similar to the normal fantasy sky ring. It couldn't store most matter. However, it could keep magical creatures like heaven flames, beasts, or the Holy Spirit God, but not cultivating materials or pellets. The objects it used to store was only the divine sword, but now a small shield was added. It seemed only objects that had a close relationship to the previous master could enter the ring. The others' miscellaneous items couldn't find room in there. It was a strict requirement. You're the owner of the ring. Of course, it belongs to you. Fei Lan frowned, snorted and said, I don't care about the 8 great inheritances or whatever. I won't worship you as my lord. I'm here to find my devil-like man. I don't care about anything else. What you want to maintain or intend to do has nothing to do with me. Also, I won't listen to your orders. Fei Lan was at the ethereal god realm and she wasn't a member of the dark sky. Since she was Leona's big uncle's spouse, she had studied the corrosive power Upanishad. In her heart, she didn't have much respect or recognition for the so-called 8 great inheritances. She couldn't get over the outrageous concept of her, an expert at the ethereal god realm, having to serve Shi Yang, a small king god realm warrior. It's early, Leona nodded. When that precursor imparted us the dark and the corrosive powers Upanishad, he advised us about only 2 things. The first one was to give you the shield if we have the chance. The second thing was to maintain the dark and the corrosive powers Upanishad. We will only keep these 2 things that we have agreed. Shi Yang beamed a faint smile. I understand. He wasn't arrogant enough to think that he could make Leona and Fei Lan serve him as their master due to the blood vein ring. At least, it was impossible until he got more powerful. Senior. I should call you senior. I can't change your title to master. It's weird. Ka Tuor gave a dry smile uncomfortably. The precursor that imparted me the inheritance was named Gru. His soul altar had totally collapsed. He didn't leave me any advice. So, I have no obligation. Of course, senior, you've treated me well. If you want me to do anything, I will try my best to fulfill it. However, I can't really consider you my master to serve you. I hope you will tolerate this. Ka Tuor was honest. Being the lord of a region among the pirates, it was hard for him to submit to the other. As he had stated his point of view, going with Shi Yang from the beginning had confirmed his identity. Ouch. You guys overthink. Of course, it's impossible for me to treat you as my entourage. Although I have this inheritance, I don't understand it. I don't know what kind of responsibility I should bear. Also, I don't want to bind myself because of this. We should live our lives as we have previously been doing, said Shi Yang with a smile. Their conversation ended like that. When they gathered with the others, the giant teenager was still sleeping. His snoring was like thunderclaps. The fire was still burning. The roasted beast on that fire had some parts torn off. Carthew, Z Yarrow, Yalan, and Tai Mu were eating roasted meat and drinking wine. They all looked relaxed. Fong Rao, Ka Tuor, and other pirates stayed in another area, also drinking and eating. The atmosphere was harmonious. None of them were hostile. Alchemist Jester stayed by Fong Rao and Ka Fu. He was concentrating on refining something, his face focused. Sometimes, he smiled as if he was delighted by this strange place. Spiritual grass and plants were all around. He had the best garden here, and he could pick up as many as he pleased. This area didn't have the sun or the moon, only twinkling stars in the sky. However, the starlight was bright enough for the jungle to not be shady. After an unknown time, the teenage giant slowly woke up. He rubbed his eyes, looking at the huge mountain and speaking embarrassedly. I fell asleep. The wine I drank was so good. Tiny beasts, I'm going to hunt. After I get enough, I will bring you back to the mountain. He shook his necklace, rattling the skulls on it. 3/4 of the necklace was filled with skulls, leaving a small empty area. It seemed like he implied that when he filled his necklace, his coming-of-age ritual would finish. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Xiao Man got up, took a deep breath, then said with high spirits, I'm off now. He didn't mind Shi Yang's team. He just strode into the forest like the most savage beast. Branches and leaves of tall trees shattered, falling on the ground wherever he passed by. What should we do? Ka Tuor looked at Xiao Man leaving and also saw that nobody was going after him. He couldn't help but ask. Wait. We should wait until he completes his coming-of-age ritual. Then, we will go with him to the big mountain over there. Shi Yang acted naturally. We shouldn't try to help him. It is his experience. He doesn't want us to interfere, either. While staying here, we can use earth and heaven energy in this area to comprehend the mysteries of your powers. It will benefit our cultivation a lot. We should adapt to the heavy gravity in this area. In case we encounter the enemy, we should prepare ourselves to be able to fight to our utmost. Fei Lan squinted and nodded. Listen to him. All right, Ka Tuor agreed. Carthew, Zi Yarrow, Feng Rao, and Jester didn't have control here. They couldn't do anything but follow the other's decision. Xiao Man, the teenage giant, seemed to know where the ferocious beasts usually gathered. When he got tired, he would come back with a beast, roast it happily and share with the others. Also, he wasn't shy when he took Carthew's good wine and blacked out afterward. When he woke up, he would leave, full of energy. He jumped into the vast forest, continuing his hunt. Shi Yang and the others stayed in a certain area. They cultivated safely. In this place with abundant earth and heaven energy, they meditated and studied the truth of their powers in silence. This level 7 lifestar had dense earth and heaven energy, which gave a significant boost to the warriors. When they had put aside all the worries to cultivate ascetically, their understanding of powers Upanishad become more profound gradually. This place was much suitable for warriors to cultivate indeed. Time flew hurriedly. They didn't know how long they had spent in this area and cultivated. One day, Xiao Man came back with thrill. The necklace on his neck was filled with skulls. I've completed my coming-of-age ritual. Tiny beasts, come with me to the mountain. We're going to meet my dad and uncle. Chapter 891, The Giant Tribe. Chapter 891, The Giant Tribe. The giant teenager, Xiao Man, took Shi Yang's group at the foot of the Grand Mountain. This mountain was so massive that its peak pierced the sky. Even if they lifted their faces, they couldn't see its summit. Extremely magnificent, big stone buildings were situated on the Grand Mountain. They were much bigger than the largest structure they had seen. They looked like small mountain ranges, intimidating everyone. Lifting their heads to observe the Grand Mountain, they all felt so small. Compared to the giants, they were just minute mice. They couldn't even reach the giant's calf. They could only admire the hugeness of the giant. The mountain ranges in the sky were covered by a strange, invisible energy. Even Fei Lan couldn't use her soul consciousness at the ethereal god realm to pierce through the protection layer and sense the living beings behind the layer. Xiao Man stood at the mountain foot, opened his mouth and screamed, "Uncle, I'm back." His sound was like a thunderclap. A forthright voice came from the mountain. "Well done. You completed the coming-of-age challenge that quickly. You're just like your dad when he was young." Haha. A louder voice reverberated everywhere. A strong, earth-yellow light burst out from the mountain foot. The invisible barrier cracked a slit. An extremely robust giant with only a snakeskin-patterned sheet covering his lower body appeared. Muscles bulged under his skin. His veins were as big as a child's arm. However, his body was like jewels, not gold. Fei Lan's pupils shrank. Her senile body shivered as she said in a low voice, "Ethereal God Realm." Although Shi Yang's group had predicted this, they were still astonished. They couldn't help but be worried and restless. A level 7 life star had incomparable abundant earth and heaven energy. It could nurture countless miracle creatures and spiritual herbs. If creatures trained hard on their martial path here, their realms wouldn't be low. This muscular adult giant had confirmed everyone's assumptions. Indeed, the creatures here were very powerful. The second member of the giant clan they met was at the ethereal god realm. The brawny giant that Xiao Man called Uncle craned his neck from the mountain foot. He happily acclaimed, rubbed Xiao Man's head and spoke tenderly, "Our Xiao Man is grown up now. You will be an adult soon." He was a little bit whiny and excited as if he was happy for the young man, but he actually didn't want it. Because when Xiao Man grew up, he had to bear some responsibilities. He couldn't be carefree anymore. "Uncle, I brought my friends with me," Xiao Man was happy, pointing at his foot. "Little beasts. They are so tiny." When the robust giant heard that, he stooped to observe. His eyes were as big as an adult's fist. They were glorious like sparkling jewels with divine light. His face gradually darkened. He nodded and said nothing else. He just let Xiao Man lead them. Xiao Man walked to the mountain foot and then turned around to watch Shi Yang's group. The giant was hesitant. He pondered for a while before swinging his hand. "Get in." Shi Yang's group was shocked. They followed the giants gingerly into the Grand Mountain. The muscular giant assessed them, frowning. After a while, he sighed, speaking to them, "I don't know where you are from, but we giants won't let guests stay out when they are at our door. As you are here, I hope you wouldn't bring trouble to our tribe." Shi Yang's group was very surprised. The giant didn't explain more. He nodded to Xiao Man, speaking to him lovingly, "Your dad went out. He will be back after a while. He can't know that you've finished your coming-of-age challenge right away. You can take your friends to walk around." "All right," Xiao Man laughed cheerily, waving at Shi Yang's group. "Come, we're going to my house." Shi Yang and the others didn't dare to utter a word. They were all vigilant, following Xiao Man silently. There was no big stone house in the mountain foot. That beefy giant seemed to in charge of opening the barrier that protected the mountain only. He didn't accompany them. They were walking on a 100-meter road leading up to the mountain peak. Xiao Man led the way, speaking deliberately. "My house is up there. You guys follow me. Don't mess around." There were many stone columns along the way. These stone columns were around 100 meters long. Sometimes they were round, sometimes they had a shape of a lozenge or even a square. The materials of those stone columns weren't similar. Some looked like they were made of iron while others looked like they were made out of gems. However, each of them was carved with many plain and rough symbols. They looked clear, simple, and ancient like pictographic characters. Some symbols looked like the rolling sea, and some were as sharp as weapons. It seemed to be easy to guess their meanings. Those stone columns stood along the road to the mountain. "Don't try to investigate," Shi Yang gave a low shout, warning people. "We won't receive any nice things if we irritate them." Jester, Ka Tuor, and some other warriors wanted to release their soul consciousness to sense the stone columns. After being warned, they were all embarrassed, nodding their heads to tell him that they understood. Xiao Man walked ahead, and the warriors followed behind. They headed to the mountain flank. Along the road, the stone columns stood thickly. They saw a new column every 10 meters. After walking for a while, they saw many magnificently massive houses. Many giants who lived inside those houses craned their heads out of the house to observe strangers coming to their mountain. All looked curious. Most of them were giant teenagers. They seemed to have not experienced the coming-of-age ritual yet. They looked naive and curious as if they had never seen any people visiting from outside. Walking furthermore for an unknown time, people came to a turn in the rumbling sounds of Xiao Man's footsteps. Xiao Man took that turn. They continued to walk before they reached an area of impressively huge buildings. Situated there were more than 10 connected stone houses. They looked like small mountains jutting out from the grand mountain flank. Those houses were majestically massive. Xiao Man led the warriors to the biggest house, much taller than the surrounding houses. Gradually, adult members of this giant tribe emerged from their houses. They were astounded, stooping to observe Shi Yang's group. Some of them frowned as if they were worried, while others were indifferent. However, most of them wore a strange countenance. Xiao Man was still naive, so he didn't know whether he did a good thing or not. He was so excited, walking to the biggest stone house. "This is my home." A white-headed old giant walked to them from an area farther away. Wherever he passed by, adult members of the giant tribe showed him their honest respect. They greeted him, "Tribal oldie." This giant looked lanky like an ancient tree, which was about to wither and die. He didn't have divine light moving on his shriveled body. He gave people a feeling of an aging man or a tree which was about to enter reincarnation. "Grandpa Shan." Seeing oldie, Xiao Man smiled brightly. "I have completed my challenge." He rattled the necklace on his neck, speaking contentedly. "Am I faster than my dad that year?" "Good boy." The giant oldie rubbed his matted hair that looked like a bird's nest, speaking to him lovingly. "You're more excellent than your dad. You will surpass your dad soon." Xiao Man clenched his fists, talking resolutely. "I can help my dad soon, yes." "You are a real fighter now," the giant oldie sighed then nodded. "When you become a real fighter, you can't be carefree anymore. You can't stay on the mountain forever." Sigh. "I want to protect my little brothers in our tribe," said Xiao Man solemnly. The giant oldie sighed again. He looked dreary and helpless, speaking to Xiao Man all of a sudden. "Your mother is behind the mountain. You should go tell her your good news. I'm going to talk to your friends here." "All right, I'm going now." Xiao Man was obedient. He turned to Shi Yang and said seriously, "You guys wait for me. I will take you around and have fun. We are all good people here. We won't harm you." Shi Yang smiled at him. "I know you are all good guys." Xiao Man laughed contentedly and left. As soon as he left, the warriors of the giant tribe slowly gathered, surrounding Shi Yang's group. They were like huge trees that shielded all the light. Shi Yang's group suddenly felt a lot of pressure. They felt so uncomfortable. Even Fei Lan had become silent in this area. She just frowned, looking at these magical, huge creatures, waiting for something. "Where are you from? Why are you here?" the giant oldie finally asked them. His voice wasn't thundering but calm, low, and powerful. "We are from the ethereal god realm. We came here through the hollow channel," answered Fei Lan. "I have never heard about this star area." The giant oldie was surprised. "Where is that hollow channel? Is it in the forest?" Fei Lan shook her head. "After we went through the hollow channel, we landed in the forest, but we couldn't find the hollow channel afterward." The giant oldie furrowed his brows. "How much do you know about this place of ours?" "Absolutely nothing," answered Fei Lan. "So why did you come here?" he asked the second time. "I'm looking for someone." Fei Lan contemplated for a while then pointed at the group next to her. "They wanted to find a better place to cultivate." "Elder, besides your tribe in this area, do we have any other creatures?" Shi Yang suddenly intervened. "Which are the other creatures you've mentioned?" The giant oldie didn't answer but instead asked another question. "For example, the God clan, the Demon clan, the Monster clan, the Dark clan, the Corpse clan." Oldie's face darkened. Shi Yang stopped midway, looking at him gingerly. "You have these races in your star area?" Oldie took a deep breath, frowning, his eyes sharp and dangerous. Shi Yang looked at Fei Lan. Fei Lan explained, "Our star area has almost all of the races he's mentioned. But we don't have your race there. My homeland had the members of the giant clan." "I saw a corpse," Shi Yang exhaled. The giant oldie was shaken. He didn't look at Fei Lan anymore, shifting his gaze to Shi Yang. "What is your homeland called?" "The Grace Mainland." Chapter 892, Ethereal Extent. Chapter 892, Ethereal Extent. More than 10 giants suddenly felt touched. Their giant bodies shivered slightly. Dazzling divine light radiated from their big diamond-like eyes. The giant oldie gazed at Shi Yang with hot eyes, not blinking even once. His lips shivered. At this moment, he couldn't utter a word. As Fei Lan, Leona, Carthew, and Jester came from the raging Flamestar area, they didn't know what was going on. They were doubtful, and they didn't know what to do in this situation. Our ancestral land. It's our ancestral land. Tribal oldie, it's our ancestral land. Oh my God. We met someone from the ancestral land. After a moment of silence, the giant fighters burst out noisily like thunder which echoed around the Grand Mountain. The giant oldie looked so touched. Divine light sparkled in his eyes while he eyed Shi Yang. His shriveled god body shimmered, rippling a fierce vital energy wave. Shi Yang couldn't hold himself. He was also shocked, looking at the others disbelievingly. You guys. Are you from the Grace mainland just like me? No, not really. The giant oldie finally pulled himself together after a long moment. He gave a miserable smile. We weren't born in the ancestral land. We don't have that luck. We were born in this life star. However, our ancestors came from the Grace mainland just like you. Shi Yang was astounded. My ancestors are all gone now. Our previous generations couldn't endure it all the way until now. We are the latest generation. However, we know our ancestral land is the Grace mainland, the giant oldie sobbed for a while. We would have never imagined that we would meet someone from our ancestral land after many thousands of years. It's a miracle. More than 10 giant fighters were also stirred up. They asked Shi Yang how their ancestral land was. Shi Yang wore a gloomy visage. He sighed and then explained with a forced smile. The Grace mainland has come to the final phase of its energy cycle. It's no longer a suitable place for warriors to cultivate and live. I departed from there with a hope to find a new place for my family and friends. The giants were startled as they listened to him. They instinctively looked at the oldie. Even if it's a higher-level life star, it can't resist corrosion with time. A life star with many warriors would have its energy consumed massively. Our ancestral land has been through so many years of consumption. It has produced countless experts. It's natural for it to be exhausted one day. The old man expressed that they had no alternative, explaining to Shi Yang. According to the journal of our ancestors, earth and heaven energy in the ancestral land was extremely abundant. There were so many experts. It was the dream place for every warrior. Of course, our ancestors had been gone for so many years. But still, many people would dream about the ancestral land as the most peaceful harbor for their soul. It's a dreamy hope though. Shi Yang nodded, I understand. Shi Yang assumed that the giant clan members in this life star didn't have comfortable lives. Creatures with intellect always have the same thought. When they were troubled in life, they would always find an ideal place to entrust their hope. To this giant tribe, the Grace mainland, their ancestral land, used to be an extremely prosperous place. It was where they entrusted their spirit, and they hoped to get back there one day. However, what Shi Yang told them had forcefully crushed their longing thoughts into powder. They now knew that their ancestral land wasn't a suitable place for them to live. It was a brutal fact. Does our ancestral land still have a lineage of the giant clan? The old man was silent for a while before he asked. He shivered as if he was anxious to hear bad news. Warriors of the giant tribe also looked at him with longing eyes. Shi Yang was surprised. He shook his head, not daring to look at them in the eyes. No. We haven't seen your clansmen since a long, long time ago. They might be all gone. Many giants looked like they had just gotten punched in the gut. They paled, clutching their chests silently as if they were experiencing the most terrible pain. Shi Yang didn't know how to console them. Seeing the bitter, sorrowful eyes and whining of the giants, he became emotional. This race had been exiled for tens of thousands of years to a strange life star. They seemed to be carrying a lot of burdens. The sea was now a mulberry plantation, and the giants here didn't live comfortable lives. They seemed to be struggling a lot. In their hearts, they had always fantasized about their ancestral land, the luxurious and promising land. They had hoped in vain that their precursor or their clansmen have survived. However, Shi Yang had cruelly cut off their last hope, turning their hope into despair. You said that you've met a member of the giant clan. The giant oldie looked at him hopefully. Yes, but he was just a skeleton. He had passed away a long, long time ago. Shi Yang beamed a forced smile. Where is he? In a strange space. I saw the traces of battles between many giant beasts. That giant didn't have a high realm. He was a gold giant at the king god realm. He was much thinner than you guys. Shi Yang was a little afraid. He had taken the golden marrow of that giant to refine his bones and harvest a lot of good things. His deed could be considered disrespect to the dead, so he was anxious and restless. A strange space. The giant oldie was surprised, asking more carefully. What kind of space is that? A space that is connected to your ancestral land. I got there through a space slit. It isn't a big place. It's hard to describe. In short, that place doesn't have any living beings. No foliage. I could see only a grey sky and many skeletons of beasts. And one giant of yours. It has been so long, so Shi Yang tried to remember what had impressed him that time. His words weren't ordered well. That is not a space. It's an extent. Yeah, an ethereal extent, or else, it should have had some floras, said the giant oldie. Extent. Ethereal extent. Shi Yang didn't understand, looking at him with misty eyes. Fei Lan had kept silent for a long time, and now her eyes suddenly sparkled. She shivered slightly, looking at the giant oldie. The old man looked at Fei Lan. Your precursor here has reached the ethereal god realm. She perhaps has also reached the threshold of the extent. I wonder if she has established one. Fei Lan pondered for a while, then nodded. I'm just a beginner. My extent is just a space of air. I have much more to do before I can form it completely. Shi Yang, Leona, and the experts of the Raging Flamestar area were dumbstruck, looking at Fei Lan, waiting for her explanation. The ethereal god realm warriors have a four-tiered soul altar. You guys know this from that god clan man. Fei Lan frowned, talking slowly. The four tiers include the Sea of Consciousness, Power Upanishad, the ethereal soul, and the ethereal extent. The ethereal extent is formed the moment the warrior is breaking through. It's just an immense block of air at the beginning. Growing along with the refined realm and breakthrough, it can be formed gradually. I've just entered the ethereal god realm, not a long time ago. I haven't established it successfully. Shi Yang's group was stunned, their faces baffled. What is the ethereal extent? Shi Yang's eyes twinkled. It's magic that can't be explained. Fei Lan said dreamily. The ethereal extent is generated by the Sea of Consciousness, Power Upanishad, and the God Soul. It's a piece of land and sky. Although the ethereal extent is ethereal, it's the most miraculous thing that nothing could compare to. In your ethereal extent, you can fabricate everything, and you will be the only god of your extent. As she had just recently entered the ethereal god realm, her understanding of this new realm was limited. Her words weren't clear enough. While speaking, she suddenly remembered that some people here could have higher realms than hers in this place. Fei Lan stopped, asking modestly, I think people here have a better understanding of the ethereal extent. I shouldn't shame myself. She looked at the old man with great hope in her eyes. In this era, she was the only ethereal god realm expert of the Raging Flamestar area until now. Her understanding of the ethereal extent was limited. And she hadn't successfully condensed the ethereal extent. She really wanted to know more from the giant. You're correct. It's hard to describe the ethereal extent. Only the master could touch it to feel the mysteries. To people cultivating different natural powers Upanishad, the complexities of each god's soul and each individual ethereal extent are also different. The giant oldie smiled. In simple words, the ethereal extent is a new, unique world inside the warrior's soul altar. It's real to you, but it's just a fantasy to other people. What he said wasn't any clearer than what Fei Lan had told them. Although people were perplexed, Fei Lan seemed to understand something. Her murky eyes brightened as she bent her body and said honestly, "I'm enlightened." The old man shook his head as he smiled, saying more words isn't better than showing it. He hadn't finished his words, yet the sky above his head silently emitted an extremely marvelous energy fluctuation. A magical world was slowly revealed above their heads accordingly to the giant's thoughts. Subtle energy movements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth was visible. The old man laughed slightly. Within 10 miles, the area above their heads slowly turned into rivers, mountain ranges, and more natural land features. Grand, beautiful palaces emerged as if someone was building them at light speed. In just a blink, bejeweled jade palaces emerged magnificently. Everybody gawked, looking at the sky with their jaws dropped. The old man's smile didn't cease as he continued to change this place with his will. The river then extended everywhere. The mountain ranges slowly pressed down. An intimidating subduing power ran directly into people's soul. A large group of palaces lowered grumblingly. The mountain flank around them shattered, sending large chunks of rock everywhere. The palace's foundations were pressed broken. Rock and dust were everywhere. It didn't look imaginary at all, it all felt so real. The warriors take in the earth and heaven energy for their cultivation. Everything in this world is also made of earth and heaven energy. In my ethereal extent, I can generate anything, and I can change them as I please. I just need to use earth and heaven energy, the old man said calmly. But the ethereal extent is just an imaginary world. It's real in my eyes, and it's real in your eyes too. It's because your realm isn't high enough. If you can reach my realm, you will find that my ethereal extent is just an ethereal creation. Your ethereal extent is the real one. If I die, my ethereal extent won't exist anymore. It will vanish into nature and leave no trace. Thus, my ethereal extent is just a fantasy world. His words were profound and mysterious. Everybody was listening to him attentively, but they couldn't figure out the deep meanings behind his words. Only Fei Lan nodded slowly, her eyes bright. She seemed to have a big harvest this time. Although they didn't completely understand his idea, they were shocked to see how unpredictably magical the ethereal god realm was. Chapter 893, A Familiar Feeling. Chapter 893, A Familiar Feeling. Oldie's explanation of the ethereal extent had opened a new door for everybody. The warriors from the raging Flamestar area fell into silence. Fei Lan had the largest harvest. She squinted as if she was attempting to grasp the mysteries of the ethereal extent. According to you, when the ethereal realm experts die, their ethereal extents will cease to exist. So why was the special space I've seen in my homeland still there? Why hasn't it vanished yet? Asked Shi Yang skeptically. The location of the ethereal extent should be special. We can go there through the space slit. In other words, he died in the chaotic space basin. I guess he died in a unique method. That's why his soul vanished but his ethereal extent remained. Oldie gave a smile. He died in the chaotic space basin so his ethereal extent never extinguished, asked Fei Lan curiously. I said that he used a unique method to die in the chaotic space basin. That could keep the ethereal extent from vanishing. Oldie squinted. About what method it is, haha. I'm sorry I can't tell you much about that. But I'm sure that that place is an ethereal extent, floating in the middle of the chaotic space basin. Shi Yang and the other warriors exchanged looks. What Oldie had explained were things that they had never heard before. They couldn't figure out many subtle details. They could only believe what the giant said. I'll bring you guys to a place. The giant pondered for a while then said, come to the back of the mountain with me. Then, he led the crowd, walking in the direction Xiao Man had left. Shi Yang's group wasn't sure about his intentions but they chose to follow him in silence. Many warriors of the giant tribe followed them quietly. Their eyes sparkled strangely as if they were really excited. Behind the Grand Mountain Range was a garden where many types of strange and precious grass and plants grew. Many giant women and children were taking care of the plants. Xiao Man was standing by a middle-aged giant woman, excitedly telling her about his experience in his coming-of-age challenge. The giant woman had a wrinkled face. Her god body was covered in scars. It seemed like she used to get wounded, which left scars that could not get healed again. She mildly listened to Xiao Man, nodded continually. When she noticed that giant oldie coming, she immediately bowed to him. Greeting, tribal oldie. Oldie nodded, smiling tenderly. Xiao Man is a good kid. He's more excellent than Jun Jiyu that year. He will be a good soldier of ours in the future. The woman didn't look happy at all. Quite the contrary, her eyes expressed sorrow as she spoke up in low spirits. I would rather have him be an ordinary kid. He could just let things take of themselves in their own course. I don't want him to be an excellent soldier. The Daoist doctrine of inaction, TL. Xiao Man wasn't happy. He grunted, I'm a man. I want to fight together with my dad. The woman sighed, shaking her head slightly. The giant was a little begrudging, trying to comfort her. Men of our tribe have to experience bloody battles. This is a responsibility that we can't avoid. That's why before they grow up, we don't tell them anything. We don't want to give them pressure. We want them to enjoy their carefree childhood. However, they have to eventually grow up. Without soldiers, how could our children enjoy good and prosperous lives? I understand. I just said it casually. The woman nodded, forcing a smile and looking at her son lovingly. However, I can't help it after looking at them grow and thinking about what they are going to face. Many giant soldiers, women, and children there started to feel heavy emotions as they listened to their conversation. They kept quiet, saying nothing. Shi Yang, Leona, Fei Lan, and the warriors of the Raging Flamestar area were also influenced by their moods. They also felt the unbearable atmosphere. Right ahead of us, the giant oldie took a deep breath, crossing the garden, and taking people to a cliff behind the mountain. The void there had so many tiny space slits that looked like light reflected from a sharp blade. Hovering in the middle was a massive space slit. The giant oldie jumped up and fell into that space slit. He then waved at them from the inside. Shi Yang and the others immediately followed him. The sky was hazily gray. There was no energy fluctuation from living beings. This place was an immense area without earth and heaven energy. All that their eyes could see was the boundless mist. Their soul consciousness couldn't pierce through layers of restrictions to observe the whole place. Do you feel something familiar? The giant oldie's eyes brightened, looking at Shi Yang with nervousness. Shi Yang sensed for a while then gawked. I feel something familiar. It's very similar to the place I've been once. Many soldiers of the giant tribe cheered up, clenching their fists excitedly. This is another ethereal extent of that ancestor. The giant oldie took a deep breath then explained, he had split his ethereal soul to create another ethereal extent. This place is also situated in the chaotic space basin. He made it so that it would never be distinguished. The ethereal extent in this place and the ethereal extent you've entered came from one person. Of course, they are very similar. Two ethereal extents of his are in the current of the chaotic space basin, but they are in different areas. One is in our old homeland, and one is here. They used to be connected. However, they were separated and sealed by the hollow barrier, which was caused naturally. Everybody was astounded. We can split the ethereal soul. Fei Lan was dumbstruck. There are many marvelous things you will get in the ethereal god realm. You can gradually comprehend them later. Oldie nodded, his face grimaced. Splitting the ethereal god isn't something good. Our ancestor had used a special method when he died in the space basin to create two ethereal extents, which connected two star areas. However, as time went on, a barrier naturally formed that sealed the passage. They are now no longer connected to each other. Pausing for a second, he gazed at Shi Yang. My ancestors and many experts of the other clans in our old homeland had jumped into outer space to bear their responsibility of wiping out the God clan. When they hadn't eradicated this intimidating race, the hotshots in our old homeland couldn't sleep well. So that year, all the other clans had joined hands to deal with this clan. We forced them to move from our old homeland. However, our ancestors were still worried. All the clans had sent their hotshots to outer space to chase after the God clan. We are the lineage of the giant branch who pursued the God clan that year. Shi Yang seemed thrilled. However, after a long time of fighting and chasing after the God Clan in outer space, our ancestors had crossed many star areas. They had gone too far away from their old homeland. They were about to lose the connection, too. At that moment, they created the passage using the ethereal extent. The great price we had to pay was one of our experts. He ended up dying. He had split his ethereal soul to create two ethereal extents connecting us to our old homeland. We used to have a way to visit the old homeland. However, Earth and Heaven energy had created a barrier on its own. Eventually, we were separated. We've lost this connection for dozens of thousands of years. Oldie slowly explained, his voice relaxed. Then, he paused and continued, since you're here today, this can be our chance. What chance? Shiyang was baffled. Oldie gave a light smile. You know how to use space power. You can use space power to tear the barrier in this place. And you have the aura of our ancestors' marrow in your body. It will help you sense the exact location. As soon as you link the two locations, we can use the ethereal extent to connect those two star areas. What do you say? Shiyang was shaken. He suddenly felt that he had no secrets preserved in Oldie's eyes. He had already felt the aura of the gold marrow and his space power. Please help us connect the two star areas and tear the barrier. Oldie gave a low shout. Please help us. The giant soldiers bent their bodies slightly to beg for his favor. Leona, Fei Lan, and the others were perplexed, not knowing what to say. There's no living member of your clan in your homeland. What can you do even if we can get through the passage? Your homeland isn't suitable for your cultivation anymore. While Shiyang looked like the others were making things difficult for him, he was actually extremely excited. According to Oldie, he just needed to break the barrier. Then, he could connect the two star areas through the two ethereal extents. Would it be this easy to solve his tough problem too? In fact, he had desperately wished this. However, he needed to negotiate some conditions. Although the old homeland isn't suitable for us to continue our cultivation, it has our clan's relics, objects that are very important to us. Oldie's eyes brightened radiantly, and we do still want to see how our old homeland is. I have only one condition, Shiyang pondered for a while then said, if I can connect to your homeland, I hope you can give us a place to dwell. I hope you will allow my people to stay here and cultivate. Of course, Oldie smiled and agreed. Then I will give it a try. Shiyang quieted down. The giant clan wouldn't lie. They wouldn't go back on their word. As he got this old giant to answer, he didn't need to be worried anymore. We should leave. The moment the space barrier is broken, space movement won't be stable. It would be very dangerous. Just leave him here. Oldie contemplated for a while before asking people to leave. The giant soldiers turned around to leave as their elder had asked. Oldie looked at Fei Lan, Leona, and the others, speaking sincerely. Staying here brings no good for you guys. Something unexpected may happen. Let's go. Fei Lan knew what to do in this situation. She nodded and led the warriors out of this place. They returned to the cliff. Carthew, Zi Yarrow, Feng Rao, Ka Tuor, and the others left quietly, leaving Shiyang alone in the miracle ethereal extent inside the space slit. Shortly after, only Shiyang was in the vast ethereal extent. He squinted, coming to the entrance of the ethereal extent, observing the floating, transparent space slits. Gradually, space energy fluctuation twirled around him clearly. Sizzle, sizzle. A beam of light suddenly shot out from a fine space slit. Shiyang's god body seemed to be split up. Space sabers emerged next to him. A giant crystal shot out from the space slit in front of him, hovering in the void. It was empty fantasy crystal, the marvelous crystal he had hidden in another space slit. This crystal could strengthen his space power. The giant oldie had divine light shining in his eyes. He gave a relaxed smile, speaking slowly. I was worried about him. But now I'm not. He does have the ability. If nothing unexpected happens, he can break that barrier soon. We will finally see our old homeland. More than 10 giant soldiers had tears lingering in their eyes. Chapter 894, Connect to the Old Homeland. Chapter 894, Connect to the Old Homeland. Shi Yang sat cross-legged at the entrance of the fine space slit and he closed his eyes. His visage was as calm as still water. The giants and the warriors from the raging Flamestar area waited in silence by the stone riff. They couldn't control their hearts as they were very anxious. The wish that they had been carrying for tens of thousands of years was about to be fulfilled. Breaking the space barrier to connect the two distant star areas, how valiant was that? The giant soldiers had been waiting for this day for tens of thousands of years. They balled their fists, shivering anxiously with watery eyes. They were afraid that Shi Yang would fail. It's okay. This kid has a profound understanding of space power. He is capable of doing this. The giant oldie couldn't help but comfort his fellow giants. Shi Yang couldn't listen to their conversation. He was concentrating wholeheartedly, more than he had ever done. His soul altar was revolving madly. Waves of space energy rippled throughout his god body, slowly pouring into the empty fantasy crystal. The massive crystal emitted dazzling light, extending to every corner under his space power influence. The beautiful light moved like ribbons, pouring into each space slit. The fine space slits cracked open, getting bigger and longer. They moved as he wished, slowly flying towards the entrance to the ethereal extent. He was constantly accumulating energy. The empty fantasy crystal radiated beautiful beams of light like swords or sabers. While he was transforming his power Upanishad, his energy transformed into the form of sharp, long spears that went inside each of the fine space slits. The space slits were torn rapidly. After a few seconds, when Shi Yang opened his eyes, space swords appeared in his pupils like the exquisite space slits. The empty fantasy crystal exploded abruptly. Countless sharp space lines were plunged into the space slits. Dozens of fine space slits were generated and then condensed into sharp spears that were a meter long. Together with Shi Yang's god body, the sharp spears violently stabbed into the ethereal extent. The immortal demon blood in his god body evaporated and condensed. Drops of jewel-like immortal demon blood seemed to have a magical searching power. They used a wisp of memory in his brain to make a subtle connection with the giant corpse in the faraway Grace mainland. The direction was now carved into his brain. A 10,000-meter space spear swept through the place, running directly into the deep, unknown place. It sparkled and then disappeared. Instantaneously, the ethereal extent shook intensely as if the sky was about to fall with a furious earthquake. Terrifying thunder reverberated as space became unstable. An aura that could tear space was generated inside the ethereal extent. It seemed powerful enough to destroy all kinds of flesh. Fei Lan, Leona, and the others were frightened. They shuddered inwardly. Lucky. They were so lucky that they weren't stubborn enough to stay close. Space power was the most magical and sharp energy in this world. Although Shi Yang's realm was low, when he triggered the change of space, the other warriors couldn't bear it. If they were accidentally dragged into the chaotic space basin, even Fei Lan with her four-tiered soul altar couldn't wiggle out of it. The warriors would get worn out and die from energy exhaustion. Space power triggered by the empty fantasy crystal fused with Shi Yang's consciousness as he used the combination of more than exquisite space slits to create a sharp strike that could pierce through everything in this whirl, including the space barrier. Crack, crack, crack. Shadows of broken rigid objects emerged in the void. They continually collided and twisted as if they wanted to rip off the ethereal extent completely. A giant shouted instinctively, his face changing slightly. Tribal oldie. No need to worry, oldie frowned. He looked as calm as usual. He knows what to do. The ethereal extent is tough and it won't get damaged so easily. This ethereal extent has existed in the chaotic space basin for so many years. Its endurance to space power is beyond your imagination. As he spoke, the giants calmed down, waiting with great expectations on their faces. They were all observing what was happening. They couldn't see Shi Yang, but they could feel the constant changes of the ethereal extent. It seemed like the ethereal extent was elongated to some place that they didn't know, somewhere perpetual. Time flew quietly and constantly like water that flowed. It has been 7 days, Carthew frowned, looking at the ethereal extent with chaotic space energy waves, his countenance solemn. What is going on in there? He stopped. His aura is becoming peaceful and relaxed now. Feilan hesitated for a while. She looked at the giant oldie, asking, "Did I sense this correctly?" The giant oldie nodded, smiling. "That boy is brilliant. While he used space power to break the barrier, he seems to better understand the subtle mysteries of space power Upanishad. I think he is comprehending something." Afterward, the warriors of the raging flamestar area were all shocked. Strange light sparkled in their eyes. Especially Feng Rao and Zi Yao. Their beautiful eyes twinkled like diamonds. Pride and happiness were seen on their indescribably charming face. Shiyang's power was what made them proud. This was a feeling due to an unknown reason though. Shiyang used to say that he would take Aogu Duo's head in 100 years. I thought he was just being arrogant. But now I believe him. It could be true. Carthew smacked his lips, appraising, "He's a genius. He can easily comprehend his powers Upanishad at any convenient time. Seems like his increasing realm doesn't have a limit. I think he doesn't need 100 years. After he's reached the original God realm, he can have the competence to behead Aogu Duo." Aogu Duo? Leona's face was icy cold. Who the heck does he think he is? If it weren't for Du Tianji, I would have killed him already. Carthew shivered, giving a forced smile. "Of course, you have the right to say so. Madam Leona, do you still keep the divine nation in your mind?" All of a sudden, Zi Yao took one step forward and looked at her, waiting for her answer. "Divine nation?" Leona pursed her lips, speaking disdainfully. "In my eyes, there's no divine nation, only my dark sky family. Your father has given me opportunities. I remember this favor. However, I've almost fully repaid him after so many years." Zi Yao's face shivered, speaking gloomily. "So you won't work for the divine nation anymore? If nothing unexpected happens, I will never return to the divine nation. You guys, perhaps you shouldn't go back either." Leona glanced at her, speaking indifferently. People usually aim for higher places. Many warriors of the raging flamestar area are searching tirelessly and with pain. They want to move to a better star area. Your destiny is perfect. Your wish is fulfilled today. Why do you want to get back there? You've seen the vast sky. Why do you want to get back to your shallow well? Is your brain not working? Zi Yao was shocked. A flash of recognition crossed her eyes. She quieted down. Carthew thought then nodded with a smile. "I have no burden. I don't want to go back." Alchemist Jester frowned as if he had something to say. However, he decided to say nothing. Boom boom boom. The earth-shaking cracking sounds echoed inside the ethereal extent. After an unknown time, the explosion ceased. All the different energies in there gradually vanished. The ethereal extent inside the exquisite space slit looked like a new floating space. The misty air was still thick, but it seemed to lead to somewhere. The giant oldie was astonished. He couldn't hold his excitement and he shouted, "We got through." Then, he was the first one to jump into the space slit. The other giant soldiers followed him closely. Feilan and Leona were surprised. They got up and entered the ethereal extent, wearing baffled visages. The ethereal extent was still vast and misty. Shiyang was floating in his sitting posture. His face was calm while the energy fluctuations around him gradually steadied. Everybody looked at him. After a while, Shiyang opened his eyes, which looked deeply profound and distant. It looked like his eyes had become the too ethereal extent. He beamed and got up, walking towards an immense area and speaking calmly, "Follow me." Nobody opposed this. They all followed him, entering deeper into this vast area. After a while, the empty ethereal extent started to show skeletons of beasts. Those bones were giant and crystal clear. They were scattered around the place disorderly. The giants cheered like thunders when they saw those things. "We've gotten through, indeed. This is an ethereal extent." The oldie of the giant tribe couldn't hold his excitement, shouting, "I've got the location of our ancestors' remnant." His figure flashed in the ethereal extent, heading towards a specific area. It was a flat area on a mountain, which had been leveled. The skeleton of a giant looked like it laid there for so many years. This skeleton hadn't been weathered. And Shi Yang stopped there, bending his body slightly towards that skeleton to worship him, his face full of emotions. The giants surrounded the skeleton. They were so moved to tears. All were kneeling down, using their special ritual to worship their ancestor. They pounded their heads on their grounds while tears rolled down their faces. Shi Yang looked at them silently. He didn't say anything. After a long while, the elder of the giant got up. He asked, "Can we leave now?" The giant oldie nodded, speaking sincerely, "Thank you. I also want to thank you." Shi Yang calmly looked at him. "Without your direction, I wouldn't have been able to go back to my homeland that quickly. Without your permission, my family and friends wouldn't have had a place to dwell. You deserve all of these." Oldie smiled honestly. He paused for a while then continued, "I have no objection if you guys want to stay in our place. However, you should know that our place isn't a peaceful place. We've had wars for tens of thousands of years. Have you really made up your mind? It's still better than staying in the homeland and waiting for death. When the warriors can't continue their cultivation, their energy will be consumed daily. It's more painful than death itself." Shi Yang forced a smile. "Yes, I can understand that." The giant oldie nodded. "We're good to go now." "All right." 15 minutes later. Some figures moved through the space slit, appearing above the cold wind island of the Grace mainland. Chapter 895, Returned. Chapter 895, Returned. It was like yesterday. The familiar sky, the familiar ground, and the endless sea with countless islets. This was the endless sea. Earth and heaven energy there was so thin that they couldn't even feel it without carefully attempting to sense it. This kind of life star had come to the final phase of the energy cycle. Let alone the giant tribe, even Fei Lan, Leona, and the warriors coming from the raging flamestar area felt annoyed. To increase their realm, the warriors needed to use earth and heaven energy as their foundation and initiation. They had to continuously urge and refine this kind of natural energy to turn it into the essence chi to nurture their body and soul. Any life star with tremendous warriors shared the same necessities, thick and abundant earth and heaven energy. Without energy to support them, warriors couldn't continue their cultivation. For obvious reasons, they couldn't progress towards profound realms or have the chance to understand their powers Upanishad. The raging flamestar area had many life stars and the giant tribe was living in a level 7 life star with extremely abundant earth and heaven energy. As they had arrived in the Grace mainland all of a sudden, they hadn't adapted well yet. Staying in this kind of almost exhausted life star, they felt like they were exploring a desolate mineral star. Soldiers of the giant tribe grumblingly landed on the cold wind island. They tumbled, unable to stand firm. Some giants who had bad balance fell and their giant god bodies rolled like a rubber ball on the island. Compared to the life star where they were staying, the gravity in the Grace mainland was several hundred times weaker. As the giants had gotten used to their land, they felt that their god bodies here were as light as feathers. They couldn't grasp their balance well, which caused funny accidents. Immediately, they realized the difference. They sat down on the cold wind and started to get used to the gravity like a group of kids learning how to walk. "Do you need help?" Shi Yang was high-spirited as he walked over to the giant oldie. "You guys aren't familiar with this place. Do you need me to show you the direction?" "Direction?" Oldie shook his head. "No need. Our ancestors have given us the ancient drawing that can lead us to our homeland. I will leave some soldiers here to protect the place." "Oh right. What is the highest realm of warriors in this place?" Shi Yang smiled miserably. "The true god realm, I suppose. We could only have such levels." The old man understood and nodded. "Seems like there will be nothing dangerous to us in this area. We should get used to the gravity. Then, we will go to the place our ancient drawings show. Do your business. You don't need to mind us." "It's good then," Shi Yang smiled, releasing his soul consciousness to sense. The endless sea had many islets. They had experienced disasters. Many forces were eradicated by the demon clan. Many common people had been slaughtered. With his teleport formation, the Yang family, the Xia family, the Cow family, and a part of the Three Gods sect had escaped the Endless Sea and entered the Divine Great Land. They could have also avoided the big massacre that year. However, the Demon Clan had captured most of the people who didn't have the chance to use the teleport formation. Many of them became slaves in the demon area, living a life without sunlight. With the soul consciousness at the King God realm, Shi Yang could cover the entire Endless Sea. All the islets were projected in his head. Most of the islets here didn't have living beings. A very few numbers of islands had a trace of living beings. However, their auras were very feeble. He thought they were so fragile that it was like an ant. Shi Yang understood that they were just ordinary people. They didn't know the mysteries of the martial path. In the eyes of the warriors, common people were the lowest existence in the food chain. They weren't even as strong as a dangerous beast. However, when the life energy fluctuation appeared in his head, Shi Yang sighed inwardly, thinking that being a common person in the Grace Mainland wasn't a bad thing at this moment. Common people didn't need to cultivate ascetically. They didn't need to live a long life. They couldn't feel the changes of the earth and heaven energy either. They would die when their lifespan was over. If they had good luck, they would live a happy, prosperous life without the need to strive or fight. Each of the islets in the Endless Sea crossed his sea of consciousness. Shi Yang couldn't sense any life energy fluctuations of warriors. Some islands, which used to be crowded and wealthy, now had a heavy, deadly atmosphere because the energy was going to be gone soon. His soul consciousness continued to extend further. After a while, he was very surprised and he frowned. It's strange. Senior, do you need help? Ka Tuor walked over to him, asking attentively. If the warriors here have only the true God realm, it's easy for you to sweep this place out. Sweep it out? Shi Yang shook his head. This is my homeland. I don't want to see people swagger here. Ka Tuor was bewildered. He nodded seriously. I will behave. After Fei Lan and Leona had landed, they had sent their soul consciousness to sense everywhere. After they found that the earth and energy in this place was very scarce, they knew that Shi Yang wasn't lying. This continent would have no beams of usable energy. And this would occur within 100 years. When that happened, the warriors there wouldn't be able to cultivate anymore. Their realms would decrease, and their powers would slip away. The strong living beings would become weaker and weaker. It was no wonder that Shi Yang had to find a life star at any cost. Do you need our help? Carthew walked over, smiling. A part of the warriors from the Raging Flame Star area stayed in the Life Star where the giant tribe lived while their leaders came to the Grace Mainland. They wanted to see if there was anything interesting in the Life Star where Shi Yang was nurtured. However, as soon as they arrived, they felt totally disappointed. The giants were still trying to adapt to the gravity in this place. Shi Yang had his soul consciousness ripple for a while. He stayed idle for a moment and then said, I'm going somewhere. Do you want me to accompany you? Asked Ka Tuor. No need, Shi Yang shook his head. He made one step and many space waves appeared which rippled, multiplying to create a wavelet passage, which looked unpredictably magical. His body moved through waves of the passage, flashing on and off. He seemed to stand right in front of them, but his life aura was getting further and further away. This was one kind of ability of space power. Boom. Vault of Heaven Sea Area, Heavenly Demon Mountain Range. A forbidden land hid inside layers of mountains where countless dazzling light columns stood that pierced the sky. They were vaguely arrayed in a complex but magical demonic formation. In the center of the demonic formation were 7 raised monster hands, each of which was larger than 10 mu of land. The palms were portrayed with marvelous and exquisite monster-like patterns. Some feeble auras were left in the hexagonal formation supported by the monster hands. Ghost Hunter, Devouring God Silkworm, King of Demonic Insects, the Holy Spirit God, he could sense the feeble auras of these little things that had parted him in the hexagonal demonic formation. If he hadn't reached the peak of King God realm, he wouldn't have been able to sense them. The hexagonal formation had no light sparkling. It seemed to be losing all of its energy, becoming modest stones. Shi Yang frowned, walking silently in the demonic formation and watching the drawings on the giant palms. He focused on the complex lines of the hexagonal demonic formation. There was no strange energy that triggered. This hexagonal formation was just dead. No beam of energy emitted from it. The formation seemed to be broken from the inside. Shi Yang released his soul consciousness to scan any matters in the demonic formation. He got nothing. Standing in the middle of the formation, Shi Yang closed his eyes, activating the energy of the immortal demonic blood. He wanted to use the magical function of the demon blood to sense the auras of the Ghost Hunter and the devouring gold silkworm. Ghost Hunter, devouring gold silkworm, and the king of demonic insects all had his immortal demon blood. At his current realm, as long as they were in the Grace mainland, he would locate them easily. The immortal demonic blood shot out, turning into a wonderful light and moving in a special route. Eventually, it shot excitedly into outer space, extending towards an unknown area. However, after consuming the energy of several drops of immortal demon blood, he hadn't figured out which direction it went or which star area it was at. However, Shi Yang could confirm one thing. His Ghost Hunter, devouring gold silkworm, king of demonic insects, and the Holy Spirit were all alive. Moreover, he could sense that those monsters had comfortable lives. They seemed to be formidable now. Shi Yang got this feeling from the connection with his immortal demonic blood. This was an indescribable, subtle feeling. Especially the Ghost Hunter. His power was no longer weaker than Shi Yang now. He didn't know what had happened. However, he could confirm that he was not the only one who had good encounters. Ghost Hunter, devouring gold silkworm, king of demonic insects, and the Holy Spirit God also received some marvelous energies to get rid of the chains in the Grace mainland, entering the unknown outer space. Shi Yang couldn't help but observe the demonic formation that had lost all of its function while he contemplated. Pondering for a while, he touched his forehead, summoning the Heaven Flame Soul Altar. Looking at the Heaven Flames, Shi Yang asked, "What level you are now?" "Level 6, answered the ice-cold flame. "Level 6, said the Earth Flame. 7 Heaven Flames answered him one by one. After he had devoured the Soul Altar in the Heaven Punishment City, his soul received a great tonic, which also benefited the Heaven Flames and advanced them. The ice-cold flame had absorbed a lot of icy energy from the Forbidden Land. The Earth Flame and the Vermilion Bird Flame had taken in the energy of an expert in a fire class and underwent their breakthrough. The Corpse Vanishing Flame had the venom of the venomous demonic dragon. The Ice-Cold Flame, the Earth Flame, and the World-Extinguishing Thunder Flame were now at level 6. The 9 Serenities Soul-Devouring Flame, the Yin Spirit Ghost Flame, and the Corpse Vanishing Flame were at level 5. And surprisingly, the Vermilion Bird True Flame was now at level 7. Except for the Earth Flame, there were 9 known Heaven Flames in the Grace mainland. He had 6 of them. He needed to gather the Purgatory True Flame, the Immemorial Demonic Flame, and the Primal Chaos Sacred Flame. He remembered what the Ring Spirit asked him to do. There are 2 Heaven Flames that haven't been seen, the Immemorial Demonic Flame and the Primal Chaos Sacred Flame. If nothing unexpected happened, they should be in the Grace mainland too. You guys help me find them. We are interlinked. As long as you aren't out of the Grace mainland when you send your thoughts to me, I can detect your location immediately, advised Shi Yang. Then, he retrieved the Heaven Flame Soul Altar into his sea of consciousness. Go, all of you. Search all directions. 7 Heaven Flames departed from his sea of consciousness. They turned into 7 different color flames, moving in 7 different directions. Shi Yang was still calm. Space energy bloomed. Using space power Upanishad, Shi Yang traveled to the perpetual night forest in the divine Great Land. With each step, he crossed 1,000 miles. Chapter 896, Bringing Hope. Chapter 896, Bringing Hope. Center of utmost 8 Purgatories City, perpetual night forest. Since the divine sword had torn the sky and left, the firm city in this forest didn't have a complete defense anymore. However, in spite of what happened, the utmost 8 Purgatory City was still the safest shelter for the human clan in the Grace mainland where many experts gathered. Dozens of years ago, Shiyang, Corpse Chief, Kunte, Zenith, Bao Ao, and Jeji had disappeared from the Grace mainland. From that moment, the war between the clans in the Grace mainland gradually ceased. After the purge of clans in the Grace mainland, the human clan had to bear the greatest losses. Not many members of that clan had survived, and they were all recovering in the perpetual night forest. All warriors of different clans could feel the shortage of earth and heaven energy. After their leaders had left, the hotshots of those clans didn't dare to declare war. If they fought, they would need to consume energy. The essence crystals, which were generated by thick energy, became the most expensive consumable goods. Once a war started, the warriors would have to use all the essence crystals. As this continent didn't have much energy left, essence crystals were no longer generated. With essence crystals, people could endure for a while. Without them, they would fall into a worse situation for their realm and their power would decrease massively. Thus, after Shiyang and the others disappeared, no war was started on the Grace mainland anymore. As all clans understood this situation, they stayed in their area, trying to gather the essence crystals to supplement their powers. No one dared to provoke others. Those recent years were the calmest times in the Grace mainland. Currently, the utmost 8 purgatory city of the perpetual night forest was a strange place where the remaining members of the human clan lived together with the dark demonic clan and the winged clan. They even had a part of monster clan in the city. The utmost 8 purgatory city had become a strange place that was significant for its tolerance in the Grace mainland. Many who didn't have a place to go or survivors from different clans gathered here. Yang Tian Emperor, Long Zhu, Yun Hao, Cao Qiu Dao, Yi Tian Mo, Di Shan, Yu Ru, Uwn Jiang, Tang Yuan Nan, Li Zhengrong, and other experts of the Grace mainland guarded this place. Since Zenith, Kunte, and Corpse Chief, the leaders of the strongest forces, had disappeared along with Shiyang, the forces of the perpetual night forest were relatively strong in the Grace mainland. Not many people dared to provoke them. Under the management of those experts, the utmost 8 purgatory cities' defense was still firm even without the divine sword. However, what they had to face now wasn't the experts of the pagan clans. It was energy exhaustion. A corner inside the city. Yang Tian Emperor stooped with his eyes closed. His slim face was cold and solemn as he concentrated on searching something. Long Zhu, Yun Hao, Cao Qiu Dao, Di Shan, Li Zhengrong, stayed beside him, their faces excited. They walked back and forth restlessly as if they were waiting for something. After a while, Yang Tian Emperor opened his eyes with immense divine light. His face stretched into a smile. His back. As soon as he finished, everybody burst out cheering. They felt joyous as if they were about to celebrate the new year. Are you sure? Is he really coming back? Bing Ching Tong of the Ice Emperor City thinned her lips, her charming face blushing and her voice trembling. Just like her, the other 3 snow flowers were shivering. Beautiful light sparkled in their eyes, which enchanted people. His back. We will meet him soon, Yang Tian Emperor nodded, appraising, he's a good kid. It has been so long but he can still make someone miss him every night. It's good that he came back. It's good, Bing Ching Tong muttered while her white neck blushed. Whether the energy will be exhausted or not, it's enough that he came back. Han Kui, Shuang Yu Zhu, and Leng Dan Qing stooped quietly, their charming bodies trembling. Their curves were mesmerizing like the strong waves. I wonder if he will bring us hope. Yun Hao held a cup of tea in his hand, taking sips. His eyes were dark and profound although his heart was seething. Long Zhu, Cao Qiu Dao, Li Zhengrong, Uwn Jiang, and others warriors of the divine great land quieted down, their visages gloomy. Time flew fast like a shutter. 10 years had passed like a blink of an eye since Shiyang had left. This period of 10 years was the toughest time of their lives. They couldn't do anything but watch the earth and heaven energy slowly run out. Their hands were tied. They were desperate and hopeless, struggling in the dark. They thought that they would never see the light again. As Yang Tian Emperor cultivated desperate power Upanishad, under this erosive, torturing circumstance, his realm was increasing continually. He had reached the peak of true God realm. He was very close. He just needed a full supplement of energy to step into King God realm. However, the only scarce thing in the Grace mainland was energy at this moment. Yang Tian Emperor was not the only one to reach peak of true God realm. Long Zhu, Yun Hao, and Uwn Jiang had also had third sky of true God realm. They hadn't been idle for 10 years. Their realms and power had increased more or less. However, they were all stuck. Without sufficient energy support, what could they do with their high realms? It was like a thug with a sharp weapon in his hand, but with tied limbs. He could only lie there and watch himself die. It was an extremely desperate and hopeless feeling. We will get an answer soon. Yang Tian Emperor was calm, looking at the void in front of them. He watched the thick cotton-grey clouds. He'll be here shortly. Instinctively, people came outside, walking to the city walls. Many warriors in the city realized that something would happen soon. They lifted their heads, looking at the sky and frowning. This crowd included Cao Zilan, He Qingman, Chu Yangqing, Yong Mu, Li Feng, Yong Meng, Fan Xiongyun, Jie Mu, Yu Ying, Yun Xiu, Lao Li, Lao Lun, and Cai Yi. Shi Yang didn't know many of them. They were standing on the city walls, on the high floors inside the city, or on some balconies, watching the precursors of the city walk out the city as if they had an appointment. Then, they waited for something in silence. Many of them didn't know what was about to happen. They were skeptical, guessing which force would come to the city. In the Grace mainland, currently, there were no pagan hotshots that could threaten this area. There was no character at a level so high that Yang Tian Emperor, Long Zhu, and Yun Hao had to come and receive him personally. Who was going to come? Many questions popped up in people's minds. However, no one could solve their questions. They could only focus on the event that was to happen. The sun, moon, and stars still hung high in the sky. It seemed like darkness would never fall on this continent. Yang Tian Emperor squinted, standing in the front. Suddenly, his eyebrows twitched. He lowered his voice and spoke to Shi Jian next to him. His back. Shi Jian had entered the third sky of spirit realm. His firm and persistent face slightly shivered. He clenched his fists, his fingernails digging into his palm. He said in a throaty voice, painstakingly, "He is." Nodded, Yang Tian Emperor sighed, "Yeah. He shouldn't bear the responsibility for this continent. To him, it must have been tough and laborious. I do hope I could help him." Shi Jian clenched his jaw. "What a pity that we don't have such powers." "I think we will have powers later," Yang Tian Emperor smiled brightly. At this moment, space waves rippled in the void in front of them. Those ripples were like fish scales expanding and contracting, something they could observe. In layers of wavelets, sharp space power was clear enough to sense. Fine electric strikes appeared inside those space ripples, tearing space, flashing and then disappearing. Boom. The void seemed to explode. A figure moved through layers of space doors that emerged in front of Yang Tian Emperor. Shi Yang. It's Shi Yang. Didn't he disappear 10 years ago? He returns. Yong Mu, Cao Zilan, He Qingman, Chu Yangqing, Lao Lun brothers, and Cai Yi gawked. They screamed disbelievingly. More and more clamorous noises stirred up from every corner of the city. For the time being, the utmost 8 Purgatory city became the most excited and clamorous food market. People unceasingly discussed. The name Shi Yang was repeatedly heard everywhere. Many warriors inside the city had flown up, floating inside and outside the city like a flock of birds. They were so stunned, looking at that area. Long Zhu, Yun Hao were shocked, but their faces were excited. They didn't know they were smiling. They could see that Shi Yang's realm had surpassed theirs. "It's good that you're back," Yang Tian Emperor's face relaxed, smiling. "It must have been very hard for you." Shi Yang bent his body slightly, speaking solemnly. "I'm back. I want to take you guys out of this exhausted continent." All of the people were dumbstruck. You found a new continent," said Long Zhu, his voice trembling. "Much better than this place." Shi Yang smiled and nodded. Everybody was thrilled. "It's good that you're back now." Bing Qing Tong had been struggling in her mind for a while before she gathered the courage to step in. She studied him with her beautiful eyes. Her snow-cold face became indescribably beautiful and vivid. Han Kui, Shuang Yuzhu, and Leng Danqing gritted their teeth. Seeing their shy big sister have such courage, they also gathered around Shi Yang, their hot eyes lingering on him. Shi Yang smiled brightly. It was worth the labor of holding on to my flame of hope. Now I see you guys here. Seeing you live well, my mind is finally eased. He Qing Man, Chu Yang Qing, Cao Ji Lan, were women who stood far from him, their faces upset. They wanted to come and talk to him, but they decided not to do. They just stood there and watched people talk. Everybody should prepare. The ethereal extent is in Cold Wind Island in the Endless Sea. I will build a teleport formation to connect to Cold Wind Island. Shi Yang smiled casually. You don't need to bring many things like essence crystals and spiritual herbs. In our new place, those toys are cheap. They don't use essence crystals as money. Long Zhu was surprised. They use divine crystals. Shi Yang nodded smilingly. You have to adapt to the new place. However, I believe you will break through shortly. Since you can reach the peak in this place, you can shine anywhere else. What realm do you have now? Yun Hao asked weakly. Third sky of King God Realm. I'm just one step away from original God Realm, Shi Yang said sincerely. My competence in the new area is still weak. There are 3 major realms above King God Realm: original God Realm, ethereal God Realm, and incipient God Realm. I'm still far behind. The other people then smiled miserably. Chapter 897, An Astonishing Discovery. Chapter 897, An Astonishing Discovery. Shi Yang and Yang Tian Emperor's group of experts were sitting in the meeting hall inside Utmost 8 Purgatory City. He talked about what he had experienced in the past 10 years. He spoke about how he had arrived in the raging flame star area, how he got confined and became a human body cauldron, how he escaped the confinement, his struggles in solar star exploding fragment field, his painful experience in extreme purgatory field, the battle in heaven punishment city. Even though Yang Tian Emperor, Yun Hao, and others had cultivated aesthetically throughout the 10 years, Shi Yang's wild tales made people dizzy. Their hearts beat quickly while listening to his story. They became bitter and excited accordingly. Bing Qing Tong and her sisters had watery eyes knowing that Shi Yang was forced to be a human body cauldron. After Shi Yang had finished, he beamed a smile, speaking, "It was hard at first. I had to be cautious with every step I took. They had bound me for a while. However, I found my way out. My realm started increasing and my condition was getting better." Except for details related to Bloodthirster's Cortage of 8, he didn't conceal anything. He carefully explained so that they would know the general situation of the new star area. When he mentioned source of Upanishad inheritance, magical powers Upanishad, divine crystals full of energy, and wonderful, giant battleships, everybody couldn't hide their desire. "I'm not familiar with the new life star. I'm sure it has a lot of fatal dangers." Shi Yang pondered for a while and then continued, "Anyway, it's easy to live there. Also, it's suitable for you guys to break through. I think a little pressure wouldn't do much harm. Anyway, it's better than waiting here and dying because of energy exhaustion, right?" Li Zhengrong sighed inaudibly. Shi Yang arched his brows, suddenly recalling something he had decided earlier. He asked, "Where is Yi Changfeng? After I returned, I've used my soul consciousness to find him, but I couldn't find his energy fluctuation. He isn't in Utmost 8 Purgatory City, is he?" Li Zhengrong became gloomy. Shi Yang was surprised. What happened? Has that kid been mischievous again? I hoped that he could be mischievous to me. Li Zhengrong took a deep breath. His face was dark as he said, 3 years ago, he went to the Dead Soul Mountain Range and didn't come back. He is still missing. Dead Soul Mountain Range? Shi Yang's face darkened. The territory of the Dark Spirit Clan? The Dark Spirit Clan rarely comes out. It seems that they are often in hiding. However, sometimes the Dead Soul's evil lair would appear and take away lives. Li Zhengrong explained, "The Dead Soul's evil lair is strange and somehow marvelous. I doubt that he has fallen into that evil lair. However, I couldn't track down the location of the evil lair, so I couldn't find him. I've been in the Dead Soul's evil lair," Shi Yang contemplated after muttering. He had slit his soul when he was in the Dead Soul Mountain range. The Dead Soul's evil lair was a strange space with a vast, gloomy sea. A tremendously evil creature stayed in the bottom of that sea. The Dark Spirit clan had some kind of contract with that evil creature. They could receive power from that evil creature, and that creature could also control the Dead Soul's evil lair. "What is in there?" asked Li Zhangrong. "It's hard to tell. It's a bit complicated. I have to go there to check myself. Perhaps I can find something." Shi Yang stood up, speaking seriously. "You guys don't need to accompany me. What you should do is to prepare and organize your people. When I return, we will travel to Cold Wind Island." "Okay," Yang Tian Emperor replied resolutely. Bing Qing Tong and her sisters saw him want to leave. They didn't want that, but they couldn't say anything. Today, Shi Yang was at Third Sky of King God Realm, the height that warriors of this era in the Grace Mainland couldn't imagine. Since he knew space power, it would be less troublesome if he acted alone. Although they wanted to follow him, Shi Yang had indicated that he didn't need company. Those women had to stay begrudgingly. "We still have more time to be together. Don't be impatient," Shi Yang chuckled, his eyes showing a gleam of warmth. Bing Qing Tong's sisters looked better and they nodded and smiled. "You should quickly prepare." Shi Yang turned into a lightning strike, tearing into the sky. He disappeared in just a blink. Many warriors who knew him faced the sky, looking at the flash at the horizon with a complicated countenance. Those people included Yu Ying, Yun Xiu, Cao Zhilan, He Qing Man, Chu Yang Qing, and brothers Laro Lun, Laro Li. A dozen years had passed as quickly as a blink of an eye. Shi Yang was an outstanding genius. He had thrived to the heights that they couldn't compare to, which helped him get rid of the chain in Grace Mainland. He was at the peak of King God Realm. To them, Shi Yang looked both familiar and strange. He was still the same, but when they saw him today, there was an invisible boundary. This boundary wasn't because of Shi Yang's intimidating power, but his nimble and amazing attainment. He had made many people feel small compared to him. Those women, who had passionate times in love with Shi Yang, suddenly found that they couldn't feel this love anymore. They wanted it, but they just couldn't feel the need for it. The greatest difference was that they seemed to be from different worlds. This finding made them suffered. They suffered because they found that they didn't dare voice their love anymore. Shi Yang didn't know what they were thinking. He had flown far away. Under the magical powers of Space Power Upanishad, he had built a small space bridge, moving like a shuttle between layers of spaces. It was like a fish swimming between different seas. Swoosh! An electric strike flashed. Shi Yang appeared above Spirit Potion Valley in Dead Soul Mountain Range. The Spirit Potion Valley was still a ruin of shattered houses and dust. It seemed like nobody lived here anymore. After the Dark Spirit clan appeared, the Dead Soul Mountain Range had become their territory. The other clans avoided this area. The human clan especially wouldn't come there to do anything. Yi Chang Feng had the guts to travel to Dead Soul Mountain Range as he was sure that his calculations were correct. However, he wasn't lucky, so the Dark Spirit clan had captured him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone missing for years. Shi Yang always had a good feeling about this man. He hurried to get to this place because of the Purgatory True Flame, but moreover, he wanted to rescue him, with the premise that he was still alive. His soul consciousness covered the entire Dead Soul Mountain Range. Shi Yang narrowed his eyes, his face stern. At his realm, it wasn't a hard task to reflect the entire Dead Soul Mountain Range in his head. Beams of his soul consciousness moved as quickly as the shuttles, extending to every corner of the mountain range. Shi Yang tried to recall the scenes he had witnessed when he intruded the Dead Soul's evil lair that year. That year, he had condensed the Hollow Soul and entered the foreign land. That place had countless space cracks hovering above a green soul sea. Dull souls were floating in the sea without a beam of life energy. The soul sea continually swallowed the soul of creatures. It was extremely evil and bizarre. The entrance above the Green Soul Sea was where the weak men of Dark Spirit Clan stayed and resisted the suction force of the Green Soul Sea. Members of the Dark Spirit Clan and the evil creature living in the Soul Sea seemed to have an agreement. The clansman would capture the souls from outside to give to the creature in the soul sea. Then, that evil creature would give them strong powers to escape the foreign land. The scenes he had seen that year flashed across his head. Shi Yang frowned, continuing to let his soul consciousness wandering. All of a sudden, a wisp of his soul consciousness had touched something, which immediately reflected in his brain. It was a feeble beam of space power. As Shi Yang had a profound knowledge of space power, he quietly sensed, his eyes brightening. He moved inaudibly. After 15 minutes. Behind a mountain range, Shi Yang used his power to clean wild grass in a large area. Under a shade, he saw a dark cave. Space wavelets appeared from there. Sometimes it was strong, while other times, it was vague. Closing his eyes, Shi Yang smiled coldly, spinning his soul altar to expand his god domain. Space confining power expanded from him as if it wanted to stop those unstable space wavelets. A radiant green halo emerged and enlarged from the inside of the cave. A green light dot expanded as if it was a beast opening its mouth. From the initial size of a fist, it enlarged to the size of a chopping board. In the middle of the immense green halo, a powerful suction force aimed at souls and was activated. Shi Yang trembled and his countenance changed. Although he had reached the third sky of King God Realm, his soul altar had an unstable feeling as if something was trying to pull his soul altar out of his body. The god soul atop the soul altar swayed vaguely. A cold and malignant willpower extended from the evil lair, cutting like an icy cold sword as if it wanted to cut off Shi Yang's god soul. Confine. Shi Yang's visage was cold and stern. He shouted to urge space power Upanishad. A thought arose, holding that evil willpower like layers of chains. Star energy twirled while immense starlight silently congregated. A scorching solar flaming dot moved inside the starlight immediately and covered that icy cold willpower. Under the scorching solar flaming energy, that willpower was burned down. However, more wisps of the same kind of evil energy shot out from the dead soul's evil lair before Shi Yang even had time to breathe. They flew out like ghosts trying to catch more souls. Crack crack. Shi Yang's 10 fingers shot out countless beams of starlight. A dazzling starlight cage shrouded him entirely with the most magnificent light. His soul altar revolved as he hauled the divine sword out. His eyes became bloodshot. Negative energy seeped out from his acupuncture points. Crack larger. A bunch of light appeared in his head. His soul consciousness added space spears and they were like rainbow ribbons, thrusting violently into the dead soul's evil lair. The evil lair shook hard, and the mouth cracked open. Shi Yang could see some familiar images through that crack. Souls without a consciousness were wiggling in the green soul sea. The atmosphere was sorrowful and mournful to the acme. The entrance crack above the soul sea had no member of the dark spirit clan. It seemed that the green soul sea had swallowed them all. The soul sea in this bizarre area seethed, sending icy cold evil willpower. More powerful energy was coming from the deepest place under the green soul sea. It became stronger and clearer. A figure as large as a mountain appeared silent, looking at the expanding dead soul's evil lair. Incipient extent. This is the world created by the soul of the incipient God Realm warrior after he died. This figure was the giant oldie. Shi Yang was perplexed. Chapter 898. The owner of the incipient extent. Chapter 898. The owner of the incipient extent. Incipient extent is the world that the soul of the incipient God Realm warrior generated after he died. Incipient opens to reality. It's a real existence. It's different from the ethereal extent, which will vanish when the soul altar breaks. The incipient extent is really marvelous. It means that the warrior can leave his or her inheritance when he or she is still alive. The incipient extent can even find the appropriate heir or heiress to impart the inheritance. The giant oldie appeared out of nowhere. Right when he had arrived, he surprised Shi Yang. Shi Yang was frightened, looking at the dead soul's evil lair with a frown. The incipient extent will proactively find a suitable candidate to give the inheritance. Does it have a life? No, it's only the willpower of the deceased warrior, which connects closely with earth and heaven. It can create something magical that we can't know beforehand. The giant oldie sighed, shaking his head. The incipient god realm warriors in our place are also told in legends. I can't believe that our ancestral land had a deceased incipient god realm expert. Swoosh swoosh. 2 green flames made a strange curve in the air, shooting out of the evil lair. The flames seemed to have intellect. They diverged in the air, attacking Shi Yang and the giant respectively. They aimed at the two's soul altar. The giant oldie didn't change his visage. He touched his glabella, and a blinding gold wave rippled like a fire mist that shrouded the coming flame. Shi Yang furrowed his brows slightly. His soul altar started to spin. Starlight like mercury swept through the sky, congregating in front of him and creating a small glorious starlight arrow. It hit the oncoming flame precisely. Swish. The cold, evil willpower released from the spooky green flame was scattered, unable to gather again. The dead soul's evil lair seemed to have intellect. Right after the giant oldie appeared, it narrowed abruptly. Shi Yang's visage was calm as usual. His thought flickered. Wisps of soul consciousness with space power flew rapidly toward the 7 locations he could sense. He started to summon the heaven flames. The spooky green flame from the evil lair had the same aura as the heaven flames. However, it seemed to have another secret, original power. Shi Yang immediately confirmed that there was a heaven flame in the center of that dead soul's evil lair. The incipient extent is strange. This incipient extent is occupied. You can enter there to check because you cultivate space power. The giant oldie contemplated for a while then said, however, you must be careful. That soul is cold and evil. It's not a nice one. I understand, Shi Yang nodded. He pondered for a while then touched his forehead. A sharp space light shot out from the soul altar through his glabella. It carried the pure essence chi that ran directly into the evil lair. The dead soul's evil lair opening was narrowing. After getting hit, it opened up once again. Shi Yang suddenly pierced through the slit. He stormed into the center of the evil lair like a lightning strike. He flashed and then disappeared. The giant oldie frowned and hesitated. After a moment, he sat down outside the cave and closed his eyes. His 4-tiered soul altar emerged from his head, covered by a 5-colored halo as if it was made of 5 element powers. It spun and then flew into the dead soul's evil lair. It was an eerie green soul sea. Dull and baffled souls floated here and there. The sky above was gray and immense with many cracks. Vaguely, they could see the dazzling space current. There was no land, mountain, river, or flora. A cold, evil ambience filled the place, sending shivers down people's spines. Shi Yang's true body floated above the spooky soul sea. He was observing the area with tightly knit eyebrows. An electric strike flashed. The giant's soul altar emerged from a slit above his head. This soul altar consisted of the sea of consciousness, the tier of power Upanishad, the ethereal extent, and his ethereal soul. He got here without a body. If this incipient extent is occupied, I can't get out with my real body. Using the soul altar is the only way I can ensure it. Haha, I'm not cultivating space power though. I can't just get in and out easily like you do. Oldie chuckled, I'm Na Shin. Later, if my soul altar can't escape the incipient extent, please help me find a way. Shi Yang was surprised. He nodded seriously. Of course. He didn't know why Na Shin wanted to go inside. However, since they needed to maintain a good relationship with the giant tribe, and because this clan was always nice, Shi Yang wasn't afraid that he would be ambushed here. The incipient extent's occupied. Oh, it doesn't have only one master, the giant oldie screamed in astonishment. His ethereal soul shook after he had gotten into the place. His ethereal soul and his body looked identical. At first glance, it looked like a projection of the real body. It was just dozens of times smaller. However, it was still much bigger than the soul of a normal warrior. At Na Shin's level, his ethereal soul could communicate and it could clearly express his emotions without any obstacle. If he hadn't known that the giant didn't get in with his real body, Shi Yang would have thought that it was his real body. Not only one master. Shi Yang couldn't make head or tail, looking at him bewilderedly. Why do you say this? You will know immediately, Shin gave a low shout. The power Upanishad tier of his vivid five-colored soul altar moved. A profound wisp of five elements aura suddenly thrust into the green soul sea. The soul sea emitting spooky green fog suddenly surged anxiously. Gray, blurry shadows emerged, flying up from the green soul sea as if they were its tentacles. They attempted to entangle Shi Yang and Shin. They could vaguely see a giant ice chunk under the sea, which was continuing to release icy power. The icy power was like winding smoke. It protruded from the water surface, but it wasn't aimed at Shi Yang or Shin. They were intended to hit the dull, grey souls. Boom, boom, boom. The misty shadows looked like they were being confined by ice which suddenly exploded, sending ice everywhere. The icy air chilled them to the bones, entering their mind, which made Shi Yang and Shin slightly changed their visage. This cold air wasn't like the power released by the ice-cold flame. It ran directly into the sea of consciousness and seemed to be able to freeze the soul altar and then shatter it. What had surprised him was that although the cold air was chilled to the bone, it had a crystal-clear taste, giving people a simple and pure feeling. It was obviously not the same with the evil ice in that soul sea. An extremely furious willpower was sent upwards from a deep place undersea. A shadow appeared under the sea. It seemed to attempt to soar up into the sky from the seabed and attack Shi Yang and Shin. Swish, swish, swish. The green water of the soul sea evaporated underneath Shi Yang. A slit appeared in the middle of the sea. The sharp point of a giant icicle of several thousand meters slowly emerged. The peak of this icicle was translucent like a jewel. It was so clear like the purest, flawless crystal. It emitted clear beams of light, which was pretty similar to moonlight. A figure flashed inside the icicle. She looked elegant and graceful, moving swiftly as if she was dancing inside the ice crystal. Each of icy air currents shot out from the icicle, hovering above the green soul sea. The shadow inside the ice mountain slowly revealed. Eventually, it was visible. Shi Yang gawked as the god body while shaking. He dropped his jaw as he couldn't believe what he saw. You. It's you. The girl inside the icicle was pure but as cold as the moonlight. She wore white clothing, her skin was white and smooth like jade, and a pair of beautiful new moon eyes accompanied her beautiful but indifferent face. Ouyang Luo Shuang. She was the girl who had secluded in the outer meteorite in Sky Meteor City for thousands of years. At her debut, she had reached the spirit realm shortly and continued to break through further. When war broke out in Endless Sea, she had disappeared for many years. No one could ever imagine that she would appear here, inside an icicle. Shi Yang was astounded, gazing at her, shouting lightly with a pale face. King God Realm. Yeah, King God Realm. Almost condensed to the original spirit. Her realm isn't lower than yours, Shin nodded, talking sincerely. Miss, congratulations on taking the inheritance here. You've also combined yourself and the power Upanishad. However, you and someone in the Green Soul Sea are preventing each other's abilities. What is he? A gloomy green flame emerged from the sea, burning and expanding on the surface of the eerie, spooky Green Soul Sea. Many unconscious souls floating on the sea were burned and disappeared. Shortly after, a giant ghost rocketed from the seabed with an intimidating aura. Ouyang Luo Shuang was naturally indifferent. She didn't answer Shin but studied Shi Yang quietly. After a while, she nodded, speaking faintly. I didn't expect that after all these years you can reach such a realm. At this moment, even if you don't rely on anybody, you are certainly the peak existence of the Grace Mainland. Shi Yang smiled. He suddenly remembered the last time he met Ouyang Luo Shuang. This woman had disdainfully told him that his power wasn't his real competence and that he had used powers of others to raise the storm. She also told him she hoped that when they met again, he could use his own power to claim a place for himself. Today, after dozens of years, they finally met in this foreign land. He had gone through a long period of time, taking a round trip to another star area and entering the peak of King God Realm. She got the marvelous inheritance of the incipient extent. Combining with her moonlight power allowed me to enter the King God Realm. She was just one step away from original God realm. She was so lucky, indeed. Seeing Ouyang Luo Shuang also reach the peak of King God realm, Shi Yang forced a smile inwardly. He had been struggling for years and never relaxed once. With the support of the mysterious martial spirit, he had broken many times to have the attainment today. However, the other needed only one lucky encounter to receive the sea boundary inheritance of an incipient God realm warrior to reach the same realm. This was the first time Shi Yang had a feeling of defeat. The immemorial demonic flame stays under the sea. He has combined the purgatory true flame. Also, he understands this incipient extent very well, and he can use part of the power of this incipient extent. Ouyang Luo Shuang knitted her brows, looking at Shi Yang. Help me destroy him. Okay, Shi Yang nodded, his face cold and harsh. He knew Yi Chang Feng had perished, becoming one of the dull souls in his soul sea. The immemorial demonic flame and the purgatory true flame were his targets. Whether it was for his own benefit or to take revenge on Yi Chang Feng, he wouldn't just stand and stare. Chapter 899, Immemorial Demonic Flame. Chapter 899, Immemorial Demonic Flame. The immemorial era had all kinds of intimidating living beings. They all had intelligence and long lives. With giant physiques and earth-shattering power, they were the highest existences in the food chain. That era was the dawn of the Grace Mainland when earth and heaven energy was still extremely abundant, much more than the so-called Level 7 lifestar. Creatures in immemorial era were almost invincible. Legends say that they were even stronger than the 10 clans of the next era. The immemorial era had lasted for more than 10,000 years and the immemorial creatures had consumed a lot of earth and heaven energy in Grace Mainland. Eventually, many immemorial creatures had to go to outer space, far away to find more energy. An ancient creature died with a fetus in its womb. After it died, the unborn creature within had lost its nutrient supply to become a newborn creature of that kind. However, its preserved soul had taken in the demonic chi of that ancient creature and became a new life form in the shape of a flame. Although it hadn't received enough nutrients to become a member of its kind, it had the original essence power that it received before its development stopped. Then, it became a heaven flame, but it wasn't an immemorial creature. Since it used to desire the nutrient of life to ascend, it had a special ability which was to be able to absorb life energy of demonic beasts. It could take in lives of strong demonic beasts to strengthen itself. It was the immemorial demonic flame, the number 4 heaven flame. Legends related to this heaven flame crossed Shi Yang's brain. He gathered his spirit shortly, giving a smile. You've been staying with it in this incipient extent. Do you know which level it is? How did it get the acceptance of the incipient extent? Between you two, who has received the inheritance? I received the inheritance, but this incipient extent seems to have a magical connection with that flame. It's hard to destroy it. I also don't know why it can control the incipient extent and kick me out. Ouyang Luo Shuang's face was pretty but icy cold, her voice indifferent. It was obvious that she needed Shi Yang to help her deal with the immemorial demonic flame, but her voice and her manners implied that she didn't have any intentions of asking or begging him. She was still unconcerned, as if it was his obligation to help her. Of course, Shi Yang wouldn't mind it. He came here not because of Ouyang Luo Shuang but because of the heaven flames. He needed the heaven flames. Among the known heaven flames, he still needed 3, including immemorial demonic flame, purgatory true flame, and the primal chaos sacred flame. When he could combine the last 3 heaven flames, he could finally lay his eyes on original God realm. When that happened, he would do what the ring spirit had told him to do and transform his soul. He believed that the ring spirit would never harm him. The heaven flame fusion would give him formidable advantages. He believed in this. That was why he didn't hurry to break through. He needed to gather the heaven flames first. It's coming. Na Shin's soul altar suddenly spun. The vivid 5-colored halo with active beautiful light expanded from his soul altar like a rainbow. It layered up and shrouded the area. The Power Upanishad tier of Na Shin's soul altar had 5 sections where powers Upanishad of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth coexisted. He didn't cultivate only one power Upanishad like most of the warriors of the Raging Flamestar area did. Just like the god clan man they had met in the god perishing land, he had cultivated 5 powers Upanishad at the same time. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The 5 elements strengthened each other. Na Shin's thoughts flickered, and his sea of consciousness, the soul altar tier of power Upanishad, and the ethereal soul were retrieved into his ethereal extent. His ethereal extent existed in this foreign land like a 5-colored auspicious cloud, which was full of light. Layers of light extended from the 5-colored auspicious clouds, covering the spooky green soul sea. The green flame lengthened in the soul sea. The green seawater seethed uneasily. A massive illusion emerged above the water like a dragon soaring out of the deep lake. A ferocious bull-like beast as big as a mountain with horns floated on the green water. It opened its mouth, facing the sky and roaring indignantly. The gross, sticky substance in its mouth stank. They could even see the green smoke emitted from it. There were layers of scales on its dark green body, which looked like small, aligned shields. This savage beast had a tail, which was like a giant python, dozens of meters long. Its tail constantly whipped on the green soul sea. They could vaguely see many faces of the ghosts attached to that giant tail. As soon as that creature appeared, a frightening brutal aura shot into the sky, gathering at each of the slits in the sky. Cold, stiff corpses of the Dark Spirit clan were struck, falling from the sky into its open mouth. Then, the beast swallowed them massively like a whale taking in water. "Condense the real body," Na Shin suddenly shouted while he was staying inside the 5 elements' ethereal extent. "Don't let it finish the condensation to form a real entity." Shi Yang was dumbstruck. He had figured out right at the beginning that although this beast looked savage and real, it was just a hollow form without flesh and blood. However, when it faced the sky and roared while engulfing the Dark Spirit clan's cold corpses, the hollow body enlarged as the beast started to generate a real, fiercely brutal, bloodthirsty aura. Shi Yang's soul felt very uneasy. From an embryo, it condensed a real body. It wasn't easy to create a real body. The giant horns like the buffalo's horns on its head sparkled in spooky green light while the scales on its body rattled. It faced the sky, roaring painfully. A real sound wave shot up to the sky, making the green soul sea of this foreign land surge vehemently. While the beast condensed the flesh body, the immense green soul sea seemed to lower down as if it was running shallow. The sticky green liquid seemed to be withdrawing rapidly, congregating in the body it was condensing. It seemed that as the beast finishes building its body, it was using the energy of this green soul sea. It's a stillbirth of an immemorial creature. At this moment, it wants to break the nature's rule to rebirth. Na Shin discolored in fright, shouting, "We entered here and you've torn space. We seem to give it hope for success. Be careful." As Shi Yang hadn't answered yet, Ouyang Luo Shuang started to attack first. Crack crack crack. A crisp cracking sound echoed from the 1,000-meter-tall icicle. That snow-white shadow emitted dreamy, fantasy light ribbons. Each ribbon had a marvelous connection with the icicle. Light ribbons filled the icicle. At first glance, it was like a magical, complex spider web had just been woven at the peak of the icicle. Each of the ribbons was connected to the top of the icicle. Gradually, wisps of ice power that looked like transparent horned dragons flew towards the center of the icicle. Crack crack crack. Each horned dragon looked real and chilly to the bone. They gathered and shot the beasts. The ice shattered from the beast's body. Ice rocks containing tremendous icy power fell. When it fell into the green sea, it immediately froze an area of more than 10 mu. Ouyang Luo Shuang stood inside the icicle. Her eyes were clear but icy cold. She was concentrating while cold light was constantly emitting from her eyes. An extremely cold aura with the flawless moonlight brought the ancient, magical power to draw the cold energy and send it quietly into the core of that beast. She seemed to have a good grasp of some power Upanishad. Her attack was natural but marvelous. While she rose her hands, she could use the best of her powers to develop her attack. The life form of this beast was an eerie green flame with a gold halo, which was the form of the purgatory true flame. The heaven flame was the nature of that beast's life form, with the basic, evil instinct of hunting beasts. The immemorial demonic flame had a strange ability to absorb vitality of strong beasts. This flame seemed to have a special obsession. Since it was a stillbirth, it couldn't finish the transformation of the immemorial creature. This regret always stayed in the nature of this flame. It took in beast's vitality to complete its final transformation, which gave it the initial, real form of the immemorial beast. Immemorial creatures were intimidating creatures that lived in the immemorial area. They weren't categorized into any race. Usually, they had giant bodies as large as a mountain. Their intelligence developed naturally from the rules of nature. From the day they were born, they had supernatural powers. If the immemorial demonic flame finished its transformation and got a real body, no one knew what would happen. In the current era, no warrior understood the mysteries and magical features of immemorial creatures. Na Xin didn't want to see this creature finish its transformation, and neither did Ouyang Luo Shuang and Shi Yang. SSSSS. He extended his left hand. The index finger and the middle finger gathered, cutting the void. A transparent space slit appeared as his fingers slid into the void. Lights were racing like meteors. A flame shot out, bringing scorching flames that covered the entire sky. Level 8, said the vermilion bird true flame. It swallowed the purgatory true flame. It also has a connection with this extent. It's hard to deal with it since this place is its territory. Shi Yang's pupils shrank. Level 8. Level 8. So strong, the vermilion bird true flame affirmed. Seems like it has undergone some marvelous transformation. Its life form is being changed quickly. It's unbelievable. This transformation isn't the acme ascension of heaven flames. It's condensing the spirit body. Condensing the spirit body? Shi Yang couldn't make head or tail. I'm a wisp of the vermilion bird's soul. The vermilion bird is one of the 4 holy beasts, and the 4 holy beasts were the development of flesh immemorial creatures. When an immemorial creature was born, the first thing it has to do is to condense the spirit body. The vermilion bird true flame quickly sent the message. Swoosh. Another heaven flame appeared. It was the 9 serenities soul-devouring flame. Don't let it finish. Na Xin shouted in the voice. Kid, use your flames to attack it. Ouyang Luo Shuang's eyes were icy cold. Icy aura permeated the place. She rose together with the icicle. After reaching an elevation of 10,000 meters, they grumblingly pressed down. The ice-horned dragons at the top of the icicle attacked as if they were real. They spurt out crystal white spears, darting towards the immemorial demonic flame. Na Xin had turned into 5-colored auspicious clouds. His ethereal extent changed a little bit. It now looked like a 5-colored sea, raising and snatching on the immemorial demonic flame. Slosh slosh slosh. The seawater of the green sea rose in the air, moving like water dragons to attack the others. The body that the immemorial demonic flame was condensing spun. A strange electric-like flame flashed and then disappeared. Instantly, it entangled the 9 serenities soul-devouring flame, dragging it towards the beast. The 9 serenities soul-devouring flame struggled hard. However, no matter how hard it tried, it couldn't free itself from the bind. The flame was so worried that it sent so many desperate calls to Shi Yang for help. As they were all heaven flames and the 9 serenities soul-devouring flame was ranked higher than that flame, its level still didn't rival that of the immemorial demonic flame. It was now tied tightly. Shi Yang wore a cold face. He didn't think much. His eyes became garnet instantly. Chapter 900. Mysterious, unrecognizable land. Chapter 900. Mysterious, unrecognizable land. While condensing its spirit body, the immemorial demonic flame was still aware of every activity around it. It was extreme, indeed. When the 9 serenities soul-devouring flame had just arrived, it hadn't had enough time to pressure it. The immemorial demonic flame bound it immediately, dragging the 9 serenities soul-devouring flame towards its life core. Seeing the dangerous situation, The vermilion bird true flame didn't contact Shi Yang but instead turned into the flaming vermilion bird true flame. It stormed like a burning light towards the immemorial demonic flame, which was condensing the body. At the same time, Ouyang Luo Shuang with her icy face also sent her icy horned dragons from the sky. The icy power they brought was strong enough to transform the soul. Although Na Xin had a high realm, he didn't enter this extent with his real body. He was here with only the soul altar. His power couldn't be urged to the peak. However, he still used the power of the ethereal extent to resist this incipient extent forcefully. He had earth-shakingly stirred up this green soul sea. Na Xin had borne the greatest pressure among the three warriors. It was unknown why the immemorial demonic flame could use the power of the incipient extent. It seemed that this incipient extent had a subtle but miraculous connection with the flame. Although it was just part of the energy of the incipient extent, the eerie green soul still had an immense power. It continually released the strange aura that could attack the souls, making them shiver. While the immemorial demonic flame was condensing its spirit body, it closely cooperated with the green soul sea, which could shake the entire incipient extent, supporting the immemorial demonic flame to create the spirit body. Na Xin used his soul altar to control the ethereal extent's power to create the special collision between the two extents. Temporarily, he could subdue some magical abilities of the green soul sea. Seeing the Nine Serenities soul-devouring flame get bound, Shi Yang had his eyes turn garnet immediately. He didn't hesitate, entering the third sky of Rampage Realm instantaneously. Negative energy gushed out from his entire body. The bloody murderous chi was as thick as plasma, shooting and condensing a giant bloody hand in front of him. It then grumblingly pressed down. The desolate aura multiplied as the giant bloody hand seemed to be able to wipe out all living beings. The immemorial demonic flame, which was still condensing its body, got pressed down by the bloody palm. The massive beast was stagnant, its progress stopped. This attack was much more effective than Ouyang Luo Shuang's abilities. The dead power Upanishad could eliminate vitality. The immemorial demonic flame needed a massive amount of life energy, blood, and flesh to fabricate its body. While it was being built, Shi Yang's dead power Upanishad had directly slaughtered its vitality. While the dead seal could wipe away life, the soul burial ground of his dead power Upanishad could absorb vitality. Thus, seeing the dead seal work, Shi Yang immediately expanded his god domain, covering the green soul sea and the body that the immemorial demonic flame was trying to condense. The extremely cold and dismal aura emitted from his body. A flow of dead energy gradually surged like layers of waves. White light spots flew up from the soul sea, congregating in the dead god domain and moving towards Shi Yang's god body. While the beast was slowly building its spirit body, its body was now half real, half illusion, although it still had light dots of vitality. They slowly floated up like the fireflies. They were guided by an unknown force that the immemorial demonic flame didn't know, all flying towards Shi Yang. All of a sudden, the immemorial demonic flame sent a gleam of fright and anxiety. The body of that ominous beast started to fade away. Shi Yang wore a cold visage. He didn't say anything while approaching that beast. His soul burial ground was maximized. An empty, desolate aura filled almost this entire foreign land. The frightful, lively eyes of that beast showed an extreme pain as it was struggling hard. All of a sudden, the beast glared at Shi Yang with a deep grudge. The spirit body it could have been able to build faded slowly, turning into nothingness. The illusionary form of the beast disappeared. A green flame with a gold halo suddenly flew up. An unrecognizable energy of nature rippled vehemently from the core of the foreign land. Shi Yang and Na Xin were kicked out by that unknown force. They were hurled out of the dead soul's evil lair directly. Just like the two of them, the shiny green flame appeared visibly in the Dead Soul mountain range. It didn't hide in the spooky green soul sea anymore. Something exploded in the void. The power that could seal all auras of creatures emerged above the Dead Soul mountain range. The vermilion bird true flame disappeared all of a sudden. Shortly after, the ice-cold flame, the yin spirit ghost flame, the world-extinguishing thunder flame, and the corpse-vanishing flame were guided by an unknown force, flying to this place from different corners of Grace Mainland. However, they all disappeared almost instantly. Shi Yang could feel that those heaven flames weren't far from him. However, he couldn't see them and was only able to sense them using his soul. This is our battle. He quit condensing the spirit body to follow the heaven flames rules. He has cleaned himself of contaminants, turning back to the life form and intellect of a heaven flame. At this moment, it has temporarily stopped the process of becoming a real creature. He wants to use the instinct of devouring the other heaven flames to absorb us. After that, he can be a new life form to complete himself. A thought from Vermilion Bird True Flame was sent to Shi Yang. Shi Yang was frightened, his face stiff and tense. Can you be certain about this? I will try my best. He has swallowed Purgatory True Flame. He's the only combined one among us. His life form has ascended. It is hard to deal with him now. Perhaps, we have to consume your soul energy and vitality, said the Vermilion Bird True Flame. Once you guys know that you can't defeat him, inform me immediately, Shi Yang expressed himself. I will support you as best as I can. Okay. A faint green light appeared by Shi Yang and Na Xin. A graceful figure descended. It seemed that she temporarily got control of the incipient extent when the immemorial demonic flame left. She was now able to enter and leave the dead soul's evil lair as she pleased. She lifted her face to look into the void and she spoke naturally, I can't see them. She glanced at Na Xin. Her face became strangely solemn as she said respectfully, Precursor, you are very powerful. When Na Xin was in the incipient extent, he was just a soul altar, so he couldn't use much of his energy. Since it was Ouyang Luo Shuang's territory, she hadn't observed Na Xin's realm yet. However, after they were kicked out of incipient extent, Na Xin had brought his soul altar back to his body. A pressure that covered the entire sky shook her god soul even though Na Xin wasn't threatening them at all. Little girl, you have the incipient extent's inheritance. You fused the icy power and the moonlight power. Your future will be bright, Na Xin laughed. Once that flame is defeated, you will officially control that incipient extent. When you've reached the original god realm, the incipient extent will become your personal space, which will be very useful. You're very lucky. Na Xin gave her a lot of compliments, his face envious. Ouyang Luo Shuang had treated him with great respect, speaking carefully. I will try my best. Shi Yang didn't intervene. He was frowning. In fact, his face has never been so grim. His soul altar became very sensitive. Wisps of his soul consciousness moved like shuttles between the double-layered spaces, connecting him to the heaven flames. Gradually, his communication with the heaven flames was forcefully lost. The battle between heaven flames had come to the fiercest moment. They didn't have free time to send Shi Yang even a thought. Those heaven flames were bound by chains of nature. They were locked in a space in the chaotic space basin. Without his space power and the connection with the heaven flames, he could never feel them. That area in the chaotic space basin was very magical. It was a place that his soul consciousness has never sensed before. In that area, marvelous powers Upanishad appeared as if they were sources of energy in the world. However, his true body couldn't get there. The soul consciousness wasn't the God soul, so no action or touch was true in that place. He had also used the connection with the heaven flame to catch a little bit of it. However, he couldn't observe the whole picture. It was somewhere far away, but sometimes it was very near. This ever-changing feature made his soul dizzy. You've been interlinked with the heaven flames. Have you fused with them or do you just simply supported each other? Na Xin suddenly asked. Shi Yang was surprised for a while. He slowly pulled his spirit, self-conscious again. I haven't fused with them. I've built a tier in the soul altar to give them shelter. Indeed, if you had fused with them, your god soul wouldn't have stayed in your god body. It could have joined that battle too. Na Xin smiled and continued, the battle between the heaven flames is controlled by rules of nature. Normal people can't join their battle. Only someone who has fused his soul with the heaven flames could join this kind of battle between living beings. In legends, those living beings have an instinct of swallowing each other. Once they meet, they can't live in harmony. The stronger flame will always instinctively act to consume the weaker flame. Their arena seems to be a piece of space separated from the sky. It hides something we can never know or see. According to legends, many strong existences consider that area an ideal cultivating place that they desperately yearn for. But they never had a chance to get in. People who have a chance to get there often perish. It's because when the god soul fuses with the heaven flames, it will hold the heaven flame down. Then, the heaven flames can't use their best ability. When they have to compete against other unowned heaven flames, you can guess the result. The other flames would swallow it. Thus, they don't benefit from it. Only very few people succeeded in getting there once. He must fuse with another heaven flame to visit a second time. They said that the mysterious area where the heaven flames fight against each other is the best cultivating area in the world. Shin explained slowly in a low voice. He gazed at Shi Yang, not concealing any important information. Shi Yang listened to him attentively, his face yearning. What a pity that I haven't fused with the heaven flames. We are just coexisting. I think I won't have such a good opportunity. An archaic continent with origin can have heaven flames. Rumor says that if someone could collect all the wisps of origin, he or she can enter that place freely. Shi Yang frowned, recalling what the spirit ring had advised him. It asked Shi Yang to gather all the heaven flames and refine them before entering the original god realm. Is it true that the ring spirit wanted to facilitate him to visit that best but unrecognizable cultivating place? Vaguely, he understood something. Chapter 901, Origin. Chapter 901, Origin. Many heaven flames were bound under rules of nature. They were brought into a mysterious, unknown area together with the immemorial demonic flame. Nobody could enter or sense the mysteries of this place. Shi Yang had a soul connection with the heaven flames, so he could use the heaven flame's soul energy fluctuation to sense that something strange was happening in that place, something that the naked eye couldn't see. He could use his soul consciousness to grab something for a while. Earth and heaven energy in that place was strange and had clear movement. It seemed that if a warrior cultivated there, he would simply receive the true meanings of a power Upanishad. In that place, powers Upanishad could explain themselves in magical ways. If the soul of a warrior could get in there, that warrior could use this method to explain their powers and study further. He would eventually reach a profound level of understanding his power Upanishad. The best place for the warriors to cultivate. Shi Yang's eyes brightened. He couldn't press down the hope in his heart, and he couldn't thank the ring spirit enough for its wide vision. It's hard to join the battle between the heaven flames. You can't do it. Shin glanced at him, speaking sincerely. However, I heard that you could use your soul energy to strengthen the heaven flames. If it's true, I advise you not to hold it back. I think you will receive a great benefit from this. Why do you seem to be so familiar with heaven flames? Shi Yang didn't understand this. You had never returned to the ancestral land. According to legends, only the ancient continent with an origin could have such strange living beings like the heaven flames. How do you know about them that well? Shin contemplated for a while, his face complicated and inexplicable. Then, he said faintly, I was once close to a heaven flame. Shi Yang gawked. Ouyang Luo Shuang put up her guard. From the conversation between Shi Yang and Shin, she knew that Shin wasn't a native warrior of the Grace mainland. She was too curious. And now, Shin said that he used to be close to a heaven flame, which made her listen to them more seriously. It's true that only the ancient continents with origin can generate the heaven flames. Shin looked at Shi Yang, explaining, but only our ancestral land was not the only ancient continent with an origin. There is a life star with an origin in our star area. When I was young, I had traveled there. That place was hazardous, totally different from our ancestral land. I found a strange flame there. It has its own consciousness. I wanted to capture it. Too bad, someone had attacked me at that time. My soul altar was almost broken. Sigh. Shin sighed, shaking his head begrudgingly. I was too young at that time. I knew nothing about the heaven flames and I was impulsive. If I had gone with the knowledge I had today, it would have been different. Why? Shi Yang was surprised. I wanted to force it to fuse with me. However, I underestimated the grade of that flame. It tricked me. Na Xin forced a smile. While the heaven flame and I were battling with our souls, someone ambushed me. I got hurt badly. He took the heaven flame and left me almost dead. Na Xin didn't want to continue. At this point, he proactively switched the topic. You do have good fortune. I can't believe you can gather so many heaven flames. Shi Yang chuckled. My fortune isn't bad, indeed. Grace Mainland had 10 heaven flames. Today, Shi Yang had 7 out of 10 staying together with his soul in his soul altar, becoming part of his powers. Shi Yang had more than one heaven flame, something that ordinary warriors had yearned for their whole life. If it wasn't destiny, what was it? I hope you can succeed. Na Xin nodded, lowering his voice. You and your heaven flames aren't in its combined form. Even if your heaven flames fail, your soul won't perish. However, getting hurt is unavoidable. You should be careful and find a countermeasure. I will. Shi Yang didn't say more. Right next to Na Xin and Ouyang Luo Shuang, he sat down quietly, closing his eyes and using his soul consciousness to travel between spaces. He was a little bit confused. The earth flame hadn't returned. In this critical moment, if the earth flame had received his message, it would have answered, wouldn't it have? However, Shi Yang couldn't feel the earth flame's aura. Has something unexpected happened to it? His thought flickered and a drop of jewel-like garnet blood seeped through his fingertip and exploded. A space of faint blood suddenly turned into only one beam shooting toward a space slit ahead of him. He had consumed one drop of immortal demon blood to search for the earth flame based on the subtle and miracle connection between their souls. Shortly after, an exploding halo was reflected in Shi Yang's sea of consciousness. Shi Yang's face was cold but serious. However, he was shuddering inwardly. His power Upanishad changed, creating the space god domain. Different abilities of space power were crossing his sea of consciousness. Then, he found a signal, reaching his finger to touch the void in some direction. Space energy fluctuation suddenly surged from his fingertip. A space partition covered by his god domain slowly projected an upside-down image. It became visible shortly. Space inverted image was an ability of space power Upanishad. That image became brighter and clearer. They saw clusters of red flames moving in the image. In the next moment, the image stopped shaking. They saw that it was a place full of lava and fire. The earth flame flew through scorching lava, heading to the deepest part of Earth's core. It seemed like it had found something magical there. The Earth's core wasn't watertight. It had slits and cracks. Shi Yang's space inverter image in his god domain was showing layers of lore going through many fine slits and cracks in Earth's core. Along the way, he could see many massive chunks of crystal. However, they didn't have any bit of energy remaining. Thick layers of crystals filled each corner of Earth's core. The earth flame was moving like a shuttle through the glacier. It became harder to dig further. Eventually, it crossed the crystals, moving into an area of a floating fire vortex. That fire vortex had a warm and tender energy, emitting ivory flames. Clouds drifted and stayed together, making it look more like a dream with countless marvelous scenes. Inside that flaming vortex, a miniature world was portrayed using light, fire, clouds, and mist. Concentrating his mind, Shi Yang's eyes brightened. That miniature world was Grace Mainland. The Quiet Cud clan, the divine great land, seas, and lands were resized tens of thousands of times. Now it was as big as a rubber ball revolving inside the flaming vortex. That flaming vortex bound that pocket-sized world, constantly taking in the energy of that world, which made it dimmer and dimmer. Beams of ivory flames shot out, falling into the eye of the flaming vortex. Na Xin and Ouyang Luo Shuang were baffled, watching that upside-down image. They looked attentive as if they were considering something. Primal chaos sacred flame. Shortly after, a thought of the earth flame was sent from a deep place in the earth's core which exploded in his head. Shi Yang was shaken, his face frightened. He couldn't help but shout, "Primal chaos sacred flame. It's the primal chaos sacred flame. Is it a heaven flame too? Na Xin asked bewilderedly. Shi Yang pointed at the flaming vortex in his inverted image, his visage serious. It's the primal chaos sacred flame. In the Grace mainland, it's ranked first. Na Xin was perplexed for a while before he hastened to ask. The Earth's inner core of Grace mainland, the deepest place underground. Shi Yang gave a low shout. Na Xin was shocked, pointing disbelievingly at that pocket-sized world inside the flaming vortex. The origin. It's the origin of the ancient continent. That heaven flame is absorbing origin energy. No wonder why earth and heaven energy in this continent has been running out so quickly. Shi Yang and Ouyang Luo Shuang were baffled. I've never seen the origin before, but I've heard about it. The origin is the core of an archaic continent. It looks like a miniature of that continent. It's very mysterious and marvelous at the same time with many powerful abilities. However, the most important thing is that an ancient continent with an origin can proactively gather energy from outer space. The origin that had stayed in the Earth's inner core of the ancient continent for billions of years of accumulation could gather a tremendous amount of Earth and heaven energy for that continent. The origin of our ancestral land is very small, too small, indeed. But now the primal chaos-scared flame is absorbing the origin energy. No wonder why the energy here has been running out rapidly, said Na Xin with a serious face. How is the origin formed? Will it be worn out? Shi Yang was also shocked. No one knows how the origin is formed. While it's gathering energy, it will also consume some. The Grace mainland has existed for quite a long time, and the earth and heaven energy used to be extremely abundant. Of course, the origin has to have consumed a lot. That heaven flame is tyrannical. It knows how to take in the origin energy. It'll be really tough to deal with it. Na Xin took a deep breath then said sincerely, it'll bring you a lot of trouble. I'll be in trouble? Shi Yang was baffled. In the next moment, he knew what Na Xin meant. The earth flame had sent only one thought before it jumped into the flaming vortex. That vortex then dragged it into its core. Right after that, the primal chaos sacred flame and the earth flame disappeared into an unrecognizable place under the power of nature's rules. The area that warriors could only use soul consciousness to sense a little bit now gathered all heaven flames of Grace mainland. The origin was freed from the confinement of the flaming vortex. This fist-sized globe was still spinning, floating in the middle of a thick layer of crystals. Shi Yang's space inverted image could still project it. Where did that heaven flame get the origin? Asked Ouyang Luo Shuang all of a sudden. Shi Yang was surprised. Na Xin knitted his brows. You don't want to get that origin? The Grace mainland's energy is running out. Since that origin is so small, it doesn't have a significant function. It would be better if we can absorb its magical powers. Ouyang Luo Shuang looked at Shi Yang. According to what my inheritance told me, when we enter the original God, with the support of the origin, the original soul to be formed will be very marvelous. We can also transform the essence chi. It was also God power. Little girl, you do have great ambitions. Na Xin snorted. You're at the ethereal God realm. To you, the origin is just an ingredient to refine treasures. You can't merge it with your soul anymore. Furthermore, you're from the giant clan. You won't do such a thing, will you? Ouyang Luo Shuang exhaled slightly. Her clear but extremely cold eyes sparkled intimidatingly. She seemed to have a vehement desire to get that origin. If the origin fuses with the heaven flame and releases the origin energy, it can revive the Grace mainland. Na Xin looked at Shi Yang. That is correct, Shi Yang nodded, speaking to Ouyang Luo Shuang. I'm sorry. If I get it, it will benefit the entire continent. But if you get it, it will benefit only yourself. I'm sorry. As soon as he finished, Shi Yang tore through space and left. Chapter 902, The Heaven Flame That Ranks First. Chapter 902, The Heaven Flame That Ranks First. A space crack opened. Shi Yang jumped in immediately, disappearing in just a blink of an eye. Ouyang Luo Shuang gawked, dropping her jaw. Na Xin was astounded. Too direct and resolute, wasn't it? The origin was the most magical and incredible inner core of the ancient continents. It was priceless to any warriors. Ouyang Luo Shuang knew it, and so did Na Xin. Previously, Shi Yang had shown that he wasn't interested in that thing. After the other two had explained its key features, he took action immediately. His change of mind was so fast it surprised the others a lot. Shi Yang left right after he finished speaking. When the others had finally processed what he said, he had already disappeared. Precursor, don't you want to have it? Ouyang Luo Shuang frowned, looking at Na Xin of the giant clan. At your realm, although you don't need to merge the origin with your soul, it still brings you great benefits. You really don't want to take it? Na Xin beamed a faint smile. As I said, if he gets it and uses it in the future, he can revive Grace Mainland. In my hands, it will only be a normal treasure. Of course, it will provide significant support, but I can't make Grace Mainland energetic once again to gather more earth and heaven energy. Thus, I'm willing to let him have it. Na Xin was calm and tender. He smiled warmly without any gleam of discontent. He seemed to be very happy with this situation. However, Ouyang Luo Shuang was unfulfilled and she gritted her teeth. Unclear light sparkled in her clear but cold eyes. First, you can't locate the origin fast enough. Second, even if you can find the origin, you aren't strong enough to be Shi Yang's rival. Na Xin smiled, speaking deliberately. So you shouldn't think about it anymore. You've received the inheritance and the incipient extent. You're very lucky already. You also have an extraordinary innate endowment. Once you've entered the original God realm, you will have admirable attainments. I don't want to lose. Ouyang Luo Shuang's eyes became complex all of a sudden. When I first knew him, he wasn't worth mentioning. His realm was too low that it was funny to me. However, after just 10 years, he has surpassed me. Pausing for a while, her face became bitter. I used to think that, after I got out of my seal of 1,000 years, I would be able to step on the highest summit and become the new outstanding talent of Grace Mainland. Unexpectedly, he has towered over us all. When I got the inheritance from the incipient extent and combined it with my power Upanishad, I thought I could surpass and leave him far behind. I never expected that when we met again, he would also be at the peak of King God realm. I'm always lowered by him. She had been sealed for 1,000 years. During that time, she had accumulated energy of the moonlight. She was a special talent that arrogantly topped people in the world. It was unexpected that Shi Yang had always been more prominent than her since his debut. He had solved the issues between the forces himself. He had changed the overall situation of Endless Sea and Divine Great Land. She didn't know what she should comment about his attainments. It was because of her natural arrogance that she couldn't accept that such a character had always been stronger than her. While Shi Yang didn't notice her much, she had considered him her most challenging rival. You're a good girl. Na Xin looked at her deeply. Your starting point isn't bad, and your innate endowment is also of high quality. However, you lack experience. If you fight him in the given circumstances that your realms and powers are equal, you will lose quickly. Regarding bloody practical battles, you can't compete against him. That kid has a brutal, murderous aura. I don't know how many people he has killed. Can you be his rival? Said Na Xin seriously. Ouyang Luo Shuang was dispirited as if she got hit at her weakest point. Indeed, talking about ruthless deeds, she could never compare to Shi Yang. Shi Yang's progress was built off of bloody battles. He had tried his best in each battle. Afterward, he had accumulated many experiences. Honestly, I think you guys would be a perfect match, Na Xin said all of a sudden, laughing loudly. You both have outstanding innate talents, your realms aren't too different, and your fortunes aren't bad. If you can be together. Ouyang Luo Shuang blushed, rolling her eyes at Na Xin. I didn't think that you giants will also babble about this. Na Xin chuckled naturally. Forget it. I won't compete against him this time. Just let him get the origin. Harumph, I will depend on my power. I will not lag behind him. Ouyang Luo Shuang mumbled. deep in Earth's inner core of Grace Mainland. Shi Yang frowned, standing upright by the origin. Electric-like light flashed in his eyes. He didn't know how to take the origin. The origin looked like a chaotic globe, spinning between the crystals. It was covered by tens of thousands of gray air layers. Each air layer had an intimidating energy fluctuation that frightened him. He didn't dare to act rashly. He was told about the magical features of the origin, but no one had explained to him how to take it. Billions of years have passed and Grace Mainland had given birth to countless geniuses, and none of them knew how to take this marvelous origin. If someone did know, why was the origin still here? Did it hide any perilous traps which prevented people from touching the origin even though they all knew how precious it was? Thoughts flashed through his mind. Still, he didn't dare to do anything recklessly. Pondering for a while, he tried to connect the Bloodvein Ring's ring spirit. His thought traveled like beams of light, entering the Bloodvein Ring. He extended his soul consciousness to find the aura of the ring spirit. "Are you here?" He sent his soul consciousness. There was no response. The Bloodvein Ring had exhausted its energy to help him get rid of the restriction of God-perishing land, which helped him summon the divine sword from Grace Mainland to the forbidden land in Raging Flamestar area. Afterward, it went dormant. It hadn't woken up yet. The ring spirit didn't answer him. Shi Yang frowned, looking at that origin. He didn't dare to act rashly without having a clear solution. At the same time, his soul consciousness, which connected to the heaven flame, showed him that the situation was getting worse. 7 out of 10 known heaven flame of the Grace Mainland had connected and was interlinked to him. However, in this battle, even when his 7 heaven flame had joined hands, they seemed to not be getting the upper hand. The immemorial demonic flame had merged with the purgatory true flame, advancing its level to level 8. The primal chaos sacred flame had been dormant for so many years in the Earth's inner core. It also took the origin. Shi Yang didn't know its real level. He closed his eyes, trying to sense with a grimace. The primal chaos sacred flame in that magical, unknown area was even more intimidating than the immemorial demonic flame, pressing its 7 flames. The last flame that had entered this place took the biggest initiative that it even made the immemorial demonic flame confused. At this moment, the immemorial demonic flame seemed to have a tacit agreement with the other 7 heaven flames. They had joined hands and attacked the primal chaos sacred flame together. Shi Yang was stern, suddenly recognizing that the prima chaos sacred flame was the most dangerous flame among the heaven flames. It was worth its status as the highest rank. Shi Yang suddenly remembered the legends of this heaven flame. The primal chaos sacred flame was a flame that was formed naturally when earth and heaven began. Just like strong living beings in the immemorial era, it could cultivate and create life. It could resurrect the dead and reignite the flame of life one more time. This heaven flame ranked first. It could cultivate by itself and it could even create lives by kindling the flame of life. Shi Yang was shocked. The heaven flame did deserve its first place rank. The immemorial demonic flame and the other heaven flames had joined hands to deal with the prima chaos sacred flame in that magical land. Although they were fighting under the rules of heaven flames, they couldn't gain the upper hand. Not only that, within 1 hour, he continually received the soul message from the corpse vanishing flame. "I can't resist it. Please help. Give me your life energy." The corpse vanishing flame flashed on and off. It sounded like a heavily wounded warrior who couldn't even breathe. The needed support that it called help for was Shi Yang's life energy, the pure energy of his soul. Shi Yang didn't hesitate. He darkened his face silently in front of the origin. His consciousness hovered when the soul altar released his soul energy, seeping into the unknown, magical area. His life energy slid fast. The corpse vanishing flame's aura was condensed slowly as if it had actually restored most of its power. "I need power. More power. Power. I want power." For the time being, disorderly soul fluctuation like silver needles stabbed his head. The soul messages from the heaven flames were rushed and chaotic. Shi Yang felt pain in his soul. He tried to press down the uncomfortable feelings. He released his soul energy, turning it into pure soul energy and pouring them towards the heaven flames. His life energy was drifting away. His god body was shrouded in light, but he was exhausted. What was being consumed wasn't the essence chi, negative energy, or star energy. It was the pure soul energy of the God Soul in his sea of consciousness, which was responsible for the God Soul's functions and its very existence. To a warrior, more blood chi strengthened his power, not the size or intimidating presence of the God Soul. When the warrior died, as long as his soul altar wasn't broken and his God Soul was still there, he would still have a chance to restore or even revive. However, if the God Soul died, the power of the warrior's flesh body would vanish into earth and heaven. It was the rules of nature. The warrior would then die completely. As his pure soul energy was given away, Shi Yang became exhausted, his eyes empty. Eventually, his consciousness started to blur. He didn't have more energy to give to the heaven flames which had a connection with his soul. The rest had to be used to support his soul. The primal chaos sacred flame that appeared the last couldn't swallow them. However, it was still struggling. Shi Yang still gave more of his soul energy. He knew that his heaven flames were in a bad situation in the battle between the heaven flames. And it was getting worse. The advantage of bigger numbers wasn't effective in this battle. The 7 heaven flames couldn't rival the primal chaos sacred flame by themselves. With the immemorial demonic flame and Shi Yang's continual supply of soul energy, they could maintain an equal force against the opponent. Before they got the final result, Shi Yang would still need to give more soul energy. However, he knew his limitations. He couldn't endure for a long time. He became exhausted and his consciousness started to blur again. He couldn't help but look at the spinning origin next to him. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.